start this afternoon's hearings. And so we have a full docket, as you see there. I think we are going to go in the order that they are presented. So barring any requests from the sponsors due to conflicts, we will go in the order that it's listed on the website. I do have a bill hearing that's going to be taking place sometime in finance later this afternoon, so I may step away briefly as well, in which case I'll probably hand it back to the chairman. So just a reminder to folks to please be brief. I think we're still giving lead witnesses up to 5 minutes. You do not have to use all of your time, and then subsequent witnesses have up to 4 minutes of time as well. So, sorry, have up to 2 minutes of time. We will start with Senate Bill 143. This is Senator West's bill on the Maryland paint stewardship. I see Senator West has joined us this afternoon as the sponsor of the bill. We'll let him go ahead and begin.
Thank you very much, Senator Lamb. Last time I was before this committee, Senator Lamb experienced a bit of a problem, a fire in his office. So I'm sure we're all hoping we don't have a repeat this afternoon. This bill, Senate Bill 143, is inspired by the fact that there are 78 million gallons of paint purchased annually in the United States go unused. Post-consumer paint, which is paint that remains after you used up what you need to paint your walls, post-consumer paint is the largest product by volume and cost processed at household hazardous waste sites. Within Maryland, 1.3 million gallons of post-consumer paint is accumulated annually, costing the state $10 million each year for household hazardous waste management and cleanup. Approximately 80% of these 78 million gallons can be recycled into new paint. The toxic leftover paint, therefore, doesn't have to be put into landfills where it can leak out. Instead, it can be recycled. The Maryland Department of the Environment recommends proper recycling of household hazardous wastes locally. However, local recycling initiatives are infrequent, with some counties only collecting this paint once a year. In Maryland, paint recycling is not universally available or convenient. While oil-based paint collection is offered in 18 of the 23 counties in Baltimore City, latex paint collection is only offered in 11 counties, and 5 counties offer no paint recycling at all. And in some cases, the paint recycling is only available at a single location in a county, and frequently it's only available 1 day a year or 2 days a year. So recycling is hard to come by and is very inefficient, and also, as a result, very expensive. If this bill becomes law, Maryland would join about 11 other states: Oregon, California, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont, Minnesota, Maine, Colorado, Washington, New York, and the District of Columbia, all of which have enacted similar legislation for the proper and effective management of post-consumer paint. To date, these paint care programs in other states have collected over 50 million gallons of leftover paint at more than 2,000 permanent collection sites. The collected material is managed according to EPA's highest and best used hierarchy, and only a very small portion of the paint is unable to be recycled, repurposed, or reused. So most of it goes through recycling. Very little ends up in a dump. Senate Bill 143 pays for the program, requiring retailers to add a very small, minimal paint stewardship assessment to the cost of each can of paint sold. It will also establish the setup of drop-off locations for paint cans to be recycled. To pay for the cost of the recycling, Senate Bill 143 requires a fee to be assessed by the retailer of paint on each container of paint, 1 to 5 gallons sold. The fees may not exceed the cost of administering the program. States that have adopted similar programs, the ones I listed earlier, in those states, the fee for a gallon of paint has averaged $0.75. The Maryland Department of the Environment would be given by this bill comprehensive oversight of the program, including annual financial accountability that's required to be verified by an independent auditor selected by the department that ensures that the program revenues are in line with the program expenses. So there's no, I think the retailers in their opposition to this suggest that the program may collect money which is not spent. Under the bill that I have before you today, all of the money will be spent on paint recycling. There won't be any surplusage. Other than this state oversight, the entire program is going to be privately operated by the nation's paint manufacturers or by a nonprofit organization that they form. The bill provides that the manufacturers will pay any expenses incurred by the state in connection with the oversight. So 2 final points before I finish. First, this privately run recycling program will eliminate the need for counties to run their own recycling programs. And it will all be devolved onto this new system set up by the paint manufacturers. It will save the counties money. As I indicated earlier, the counties are currently spending $10 million a year to handle paint recycling. That won't be the case anymore with this program that becomes law. Secondly, the paint stewardship legislation is supported by most paint retailers because they can voluntarily agree to establish a collection location at the retail store. This will bring customers back to their store. The customers will go to the store to buy the paint, and then when they finish with the paint, return to the store with the empty or nearly empty paint can and just turn it in. This will bring customers into the retail establishments. And last time I checked, most retail establishments prize the opportunity to bring more customers into their establishments who may buy stuff while they're there. One final thing, and that is the Maryland Department of the Environment is supporting this bill and has sent to me 2 very modest amendments to the bill, which I will provide to committee counsel. To summarize, Senate Bill 143 establishes a convenient statewide paint collection and recycling program that's completely privately managed, and it has proven to be effective in other states at reducing government costs, protecting the environment, and creating jobs. I appreciate the committee's consideration of this bill, and I'll be more than happy to answer any follow-up questions the committee may have.
All right, thank you, Senator West. We do have a panel of sponsor witnesses. We also have 7 people that are signed up for oral. The lead sponsor witness is Martha Ainsworth from Maryland Sierra Club. Ms. Ainsworth, it looks like you are there. You have up to 5 minutes. You do not have to use your full time. Encourage you to please be new and be brief in your remarks. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Pinsky, Acting Chair Lamb, Vice Chair Kagan, and committee members. I'm Martha Ainsworth, Chair of the Maryland Sierra Club's Zero Waste Team, speaking in strong support of SB 143 on behalf of the 70,000 members and supporters of the Maryland Sierra Club. Nationwide, 10% of purchased paint goes unused. Most of it can be recycled. When it's dumped in the trash or down the drain, unused paint adds to the cost of waste disposal and can contaminate the environment. As Senator West pointed out, 18 counties in Baltimore offer paint collection and recycling, but it's often not convenient. And 5 counties offer none. The paint stewardship program will make manufacturers responsible for collection, reuse, recycling, and disposal of leftover paint. It's an effective program already operating in many states and Washington, D.C. They educate the public and improve the convenience of returning leftover paint through participating retailers. It'll increase collection, reuse, and recycling of leftover paint in every Maryland county. Counties that currently offer paint collection would save tens of thousands of dollars. In 2019, for example, in Prince George's County, they spent $165,000 on paint collection and recycling. In this program, taxpayers would not be footing these costs. all counties would save in the cost of landfilling or incineration of paint that's put into trash. The program's financed by an assessment on each can of paint sold. It may not exceed the cost of running the program. The producers and consumers of paint finance the program, not taxpayers. The program would be subject to public accountability, as noted by Senator West. And we would like to suggest to allow for a program to improve over time as lessons are learned. The Sierra Club recommends an amendment that would require plan renewal every 5 years whenever there's a change in the assessment or if required by MDE. That provides extra oversight. A renewable plan is a standard feature of modern stewardship programs, and it will improve program effectiveness. We thank Senator West for his leadership on this bill, and the Sierra Club respectfully requests a favorable report on SB 143. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ainsworth. Thanks for your brevity. Next, we have from the sponsor panel, Peter Housel from the Maryland Recycling Network. You have up to 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. My name is Peter Housel. I am the Executive Director of the Maryland Recycling Network. Our members are public sector recycling managers, private sector recyclers, and recycling advocates. We support the sustainable reduction, reuse, and recycling of materials otherwise destined for disposal and the purchase of products made with recycled content. We support this bill, and we thank Senator West for introducing it. If passed, this bill will substantially increase the recycling of paint, a common consumer product that is not easily recycled. Many of both the senator and other witnesses have testified to the effectiveness of this bill as it's been realized in a number of states, including the District of Columbia. So I won't go through that aspect of the bill, but we are suggesting one amendment to the bill, and it will require that the producer group to provide each county with a report of the volume of paint collected in that county in time for the county to include that data in its annual Maryland Recycling Act report. The wording and the location of the amendment are part of our written testimony. And just in summary, adding paint to the universe of recycled materials covered by the producer responsibility laws will enhance recycling in our state. We ask you to support this legislation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Housel. Now that you had spoken, I remember meeting you actually earlier.
Yes.
When I was canvassing your neighborhood. So it's good to see you again.
Good to see you too.
Thanks for joining this afternoon.
I was going to bring some of my empty paint cans, but they decided they wanted to stay in the back room.
Well, you jogged my memory. I remember talking to you earlier about this. So next, we will go to folks who are not on the sponsor panel, but who are signed up for providing oral testimony. We'll start at the top with Mr. Scott Castle from the Product Stewardship Commission. Mr. Castle, are you there?
I am here. Can you see me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Acting Chair Lamb, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. My name is Scott Castle. I'm the CEO and founder of the Product Stewardship Institute, and I'm here in strong support of SB 143. I also want to thank Senator West for sponsoring this bill. Our organization is a 20-year-old nonprofit with membership from 47 state environmental agencies and hundreds of local governments. And I personally worked with the paint industry and many other stakeholders for 4 solid years to negotiate a model agreement that was signed in 2007 by the paint industry, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, numerous state and local government agencies, and paint recyclers. And this model is the basis for the laws that Senator West had mentioned, the 10 states and District of Columbia, which have resulted in over 50 million gallons of paint being collected. And it's also the basis for SB 143. Same model as all the others and same model negotiated with all the stakeholders. I too won't repeat all the benefits of this law. There's financial savings, there's convenient locations for the consumer, more reuse and recycling. They'll save on the water bodies, protecting the water bodies of Maryland. And one of the things that hasn't been said, it reduces greenhouse gas impacts. By reuse and recycling, you don't need to use the energy to make more paint here. It also creates a lot of jobs, which you'll be hearing about soon. Lastly, our organization evaluated several of these state paint care programs and found widespread satisfaction among retailers. Yes, retailers love this program nationwide, municipal governments, and paint consumers. So PSI requests a favorable report on SB 143. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Cassell. Next, we have favorable verbal testimony from Ms. Heidi McAuliffe from the American Coatings Association. Ms. McAuliffe, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much.
Great, good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, Senator West. Thank you very much for your leadership on this bill. Thrilled to be here. The American Coatings Association and the paint industry wholeheartedly support this bill. And we are really hopeful that Maryland will join all of our other states that have passed stewardship legislation. We're anxious to bring this service to Maryland residents, provide free, convenient collection opportunities for leftover architectural paint waste, significant cost savings, as others have already mentioned, and the environmental benefits of cleaner water that will result from diverting this waste stream from landfills. We make it very easy to clean out leftover paint from your basements or garages when you can take it to a local retailer without paying any fees. Our program makes this a reality by expanding the number of collection sites to include retail stores that are convenient for all residents. In our programs across the country, we have about 2,000 different collection sites. About 1,800 of those are retailers. This program is a zero cost to Maryland. Our goal is to make it a zero cost program. It is operated by Paint Care, our stewardship organization. And as you've heard, our services are supported by a nominal fee on the sale of new paint. There is no cost to the state of Maryland, as we will pay, as we work with Maryland Department of the Environment, we will pay for their time and resources that they use to review our program plan and our annual reports. We do need this authorizing legislation to begin work in Maryland in order to prevent anti-competition violations and to provide a level playing field for manufacturers, distributors, and retailers. This program is a win-win for Maryland. We ask you for a favorable report. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. McAuliffe, right on time. Next, we have favorable testimony from Mr. Sangeev Bagaria, representing the International Paint Recycling Association. Mr. Bagaria, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Acting Chair Lamb and members of the committee. My name is Sanjeev Bagaria. I'm the CEO of GDB International, a leading paint recycling company in the United States. I'm also the president of the International Paint Recycling Association, which is comprised of almost all of the recycled paint manufacturers in the USA. GDB has been recycling paint for the past 25 years, and we have paint recycling facilities in several states in the USA. GDB team comprises of 300 plus dedicated staff who are very passionate about paint recycling. In my 25 plus years in the recycling industry, I have seen the great benefits of the paint recycling across the globe, especially in our country. In our facility on the East Coast, we receive leftover household paint from municipal household hazardous waste programs, but the bulk of the leftover paint comes from the state of Connecticut, Maine, and Rhode Island. All of these states have enacted the paint stewardship legislation. I would like to bring to the kind attention to this committee the several benefits this paint recycling bill would bring to the state of Maryland and to its residents. Maryland residents generate 1.3 million gallons of leftover paint each year. Most of this leftover paint ends up in landfills, causing adverse impact on our environment. Passage of this bill would mean that latex paint is kept out of the landfill forever, as this bill would not only allow paint recycling, but also the recycling of the leftover cans. Just 1 gallon of paint in the landfill can ruin an entire year's supply of drinking water for almost 50 people. Thus, leftover paint in the landfill can have serious concerns for humans, animals, and plant life, not to mention the damage it causes to our environment. Millions of plastic and metal cans are also landfilled once the leftover paint can is discarded.
McGarry, your time has expired. Can you wrap up?
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr.
So-
Gary. I see a question from the chairman. Do you want to ask it now or later after the witnesses? There's still some favorable witnesses left.
I'll wait, Mr. Acting Chairman.
Okay, all right. Next, we have favorable testimony from Ms. Pam Casemeyer, representing the American Coatings Association. Ms. Casemeyer, go ahead.
Hello, members of the committee. I'm Pam Pinsky, also representing the paint industry, and I'll be very brief because mostly I wanted to spend a little bit of time catching some specific points and questions that I know have been raised in the past relative to this conversation and reinforce a few things that you've heard from previous witnesses, because I think they've done a great job explaining the excellent outcomes that this program could have. First, I would like to talk about the concern that some have raised about the program accumulating excess revenues. How this program gets implemented if it's passed. The program meets with the local jurisdictions. It reaches out to the retail community. And this is not just solely paint retailers, it's really anyone that sells paint. So it could be your Ace Hardwares, and they do participate in other states. And reaches out and finds out from each of the local jurisdictions, how can we work with you? What do you want us to take over? How does that work? And the jurisdictions work with them. So it's very individualized to the needs of the various jurisdictions, plus the addition of the take back program and those kinds of issues. That plan gets put together and submitted to MDE for approval. It has to be in accord with this statute and MDE's authority. Once approved, every year after the program is operated, as you have heard, MDE gets to select an independent financial auditor to review the finances and the compliance with the program plan. That's what we want it to be. We want to be able to say to everyone, we are accountable for how we are managing paint by oversight with the state while we do it independently and save local government money and provide retailers with the opportunity to service take back locations. MDE, as the sponsor said, offered an amendment to clarify that enforcement. Some people are concerned that the law isn't clear enough. We've always assumed they had that based on the statute drafted. So their amendment certainly is more than acceptable to us. If it provides comfort, we're good with that, because we believe the state does have the oversight, but doesn't have to run the program. And then the last small piece, I might be out of time. But the last small component is this tax issue, which it is not a tax, but that debate we can have later. It is a management fee, an environmental assessment fee that's regulated and accounted for by the state, so that it is not mismanaged and serves the objectives of the program.
Okay, thank you. So that wraps up the folks that are signed up for verbal testimony. I see we have questions. We'll start with Senator Pinsky.
Thank you, Senator Lamb. And I'm not sure if this is for the sponsor or one of the advocates. I don't know how the sales breaks down between the big box stores of paint versus the outlets like Sherwin-Williams, Benjamin Moore. But given that question, do we know if the big box stores working in the state, whether it be Home Depot, Lowe's, or Walmart, have committed to agreeing to be a receptacle in terms of a bring back a location? That's part one. The second part is, will the other major outlets of their named paint, like Sherwin-Williams, Benjamin Moore, any others, have they all signed on to agree to be receptacle sites?
Pam, could you try to answer that question? I don't know the answer.
It might be, if you don't mind, better answered by Heidi McAuliffe. I think that varies from state to state because all of those entities are reached out and we look at it geographically. The bill does provide, I'm sort of answering it, sorry, maybe Heidi can jump in case I misstate something. The bill requires access within so many miles for everyone in the state. So it's the program's obligation to provide enough take back locations that it's accessible for everyone. So no one's obligated, but in different states, most of the paint retailers themselves and many of the larger stores like an Ace Hardware or whatever. It varies, and maybe Heidi, if there's any additional clarification on that.
Thanks, Pam. I'll just comment that we do use a geographic imaging system to target where our collection locations should be located, because we do have a convenience standard that we will meet. All residents in Maryland would be within 15 miles of a collection location. And we use the geographic imaging system to help us sort of plot where all of those locations should be. So what we'll do once we plot those locations is we'll look at all of the eligible retail establishments and reach out to 100% of those eligible retail locations and ask them to volunteer to be a location. We do work very cooperatively with the big box stores. Typically, they do not volunteer to be collection locations, but they are a part of our program as they assess the fee. They hand out our educational materials to all consumers that purchase paint, and we do work very well with them.
Yeah. First of all, I appreciate that. And I saw the 15 miles, which I still find fairly far. It would seem to me the logic would be to have collection locations where they're likely to purchase more paint. So in other words, if they're coming for more paint, bring back their old 90% empty containers. And I guess I would have hoped that prior to us voting on this bill, some preliminary conversation would take place with those facilities and those businesses that sell a lot of paint. So, if you have nothing more definitive, it is what it is. I mean, I'm sympathetic to the plan, but you want to make it easy for people to utilize. And either it's got to be close or it's got to be where they're going for the next paint. I mean, people who paint usually will repaint their own house. Obviously, if they're commercial painters, they will understand this because they acquire lots of paint. So I just wanted to raise that point. If we want it in Maryland, we want to make it convenient and comfortable if we want to make sure it works. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Senator Pinsky. Next, we have Senator Hester. You have a question?
Yes, thank you, Acting Chair. So I was just thinking about the management fee and whether it covers the entire cost of the process. And when I think about like end of product life cycle responsibility, I think of like the entire supply chain, pitching in to make sure that the product is recycled. And so my question is the consumer bearing the entire cost of the recycling, or are the manufacturers of the paint contributing as well?
I think the answer is under the bill, the consumers, the 75 cents a gallon should cover the entire cost of the program. But Heidi, you've been in other states. Am I correct on that?
But the consumer pays the fee, an added fee when they purchase paint. And that is basically 100% of the revenue for this program. But the manufacturers actually fund the program when we first begin. So what happens when we pass a law is the manufacturers will figure out what their sales are in the state of Maryland. And they'll take the fee, whatever it is, the fee per gallon, the fee per 5 gallon, and make that calculation for whatever they're selling into the state of Maryland, and they'll cut a check to Paint Care. And those are the funds that Paint Care runs on. And from that moment forward, manufacturers then are monitoring their sales and sending us reports and sending us the funding for whatever it is they're selling in the state of Maryland. So our funds always come from the paint manufacturer. The manufacturer then passes that fee along to the distributors and to the retailers, and the retailers are then reimbursed by consumers. So it is sort of a shared cost that goes through the entire supply chain.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator Hester. Next, I see a question from Senator Simon Air.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to have you here. So I have one or two questions, but then that last question from Senator Hester brought up another question. So I don't know who it was. Heidi, I think, was talking. So I understand there's 75 cents per gallon that the consumer is charged. But then you said something about the manufacturer pays some organization some money, and then it's passed on to the retailer, who then again it passes on to the consumer. How much additional cost is that on the consumer?
At the beginning of the program, we'll determine what the fee schedule is for the state of Maryland, and it'll be unique to the state of Maryland. Right now in our states, for a 1 gallon can of paint, that fee ranges between 75 cents and 99 cents. But that is the fee that a consumer will pay on top of the cost of whatever paint they're purchasing, whether it's a Sherwin-Williams or a Benjamin Moore or Behr paint.
Okay, so you're saying that 75 cents to 99 cents, the manufacturer pays up front, but then gets reimbursed through the price he charges the retailer, and then the consumer will pick that up.
Correct.
Okay, so the manufacturer is not picking up any of the costs, he's just passing it on.
But he's also contributing by, monitoring their sales and continual reporting to us on sales. That is
Okay.
almost a full-time job for them.
Gotcha. And then probably for the sponsor, who I have great respect for, I kept hearing in the beginning that, the county governments will be saving millions of dollars and taxpayers won't pay for it. It'll be the consumers, not from you necessarily, but I mean, consumers are taxpayers and almost everybody has paint. So I didn't follow that logic. But was there any consideration that the counties have a certain budget for their paint facilities, and they're going to save a lot of money from doing that by having this stewardship program, to just have the county use that budget money to supply the fees? And that way the taxpayers already paid those into the government and they don't have to pay the additional fee.
Well, that's an interesting idea. That's not what the bill provides.
Just a thought. I mean, I know the debate last year was on the consumer was the one being hit with all the fees, and this hearing revealed to me that's the case, and the manufacturers are just passing it on. And I think it's a great idea, and I support it in that sense. And I was just wondering if maybe we can talk about this offline to see if there's some way to take some of the burden off the consumer. And
well,
partial.
Senator, one way or the other, ultimately, we, the consumer, pay for everything. So we either pay through our county taxes, the county money, and then the county spends some of that money to handle the recycling, or we pay, the county doesn't have to spend the money for the recycling because this program's going to take care of it. And we pay for this program at the rate of, in most cases, it's been 75 cents. I think there's one state where it's 99 cents, but all the other ones I saw at 75 cents. So that's why I've been using 75 cents number per gallon. That ought to cover the cost of this program.
Yeah, and last thing I'll say there is, if the county refunded that money to the consumers or the taxpayers that they're no longer charging, I would agree. But I think what will happen is the county will
They'll spend it on something else.
Exactly. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you, Sen Simon Air. Looks like last question from Senator Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just trying to do some quick math on stuff. I have a question. I don't know whether directed to Senator West or Ms. Casemeyer or someone else, but as I was listening to this bill, and we've heard it before, and this committee passed this bill last year, if I remember correctly, or maybe it was 2 years ago, but I was thinking of what else we charge kind of as a user fee. And the ones I thought of, this committee just passed out the spay neuter fund, where when you buy your can of cat food, that there is a fee that is paid by the manufacturer and stuff for the can of cat food. And then bottle bills, which we've talked about over the years, pay a deposit and stuff for can, and our 911 fees, which I'm very familiar with, which go to protect our 911 services and fund exclusively that. Tell me how this is similar to or different from that, because isn't it a similar user fee to kind of be responsible for what it is that we're buying?
Yeah, that's why
tires. Actually, tires are another one.
That's why I was attracted to the bill in the beginning when it was brought to me. I thought, this makes so much sense. So yes, it's only when you're going to paint a room in your house that you would have occasion to pay this fee. So if you have an apartment and you're a tenant and the landlord's responsible for paying the rooms, you would never pay the fee.
Right. And 75 cents, I did a quick look at Lowe's in my district or something. It looks like you're talking about, less than 5% fee, which is less than sales tax.
Tiny. Ann and I repainted our master bedroom about 3 years ago.
Okay.
It cost us a fair amount of money for getting the painters in and everything. If they use maybe 5 gallons of paint, what is it, 75 cents times 5 gallons? A minuscule portion of the cost that we spent to get the painters in to repaint the room.
Right. Ms. Casemeyer, anything you would add to that? Just to I don't understand why people are confused by this, which is confusing me because it just seems a little bit common sense. So what am I missing?
No, you're not missing anything. And the other thing you should know is the program also provides some additional benefit to consumers other than just the cost of running the program. Like for instance, there's a mandate for them to provide consumer information. So if I go to the hardware store and I'm not sure how much paint I need, they have a lot of information to limit the amount of paint you buy. If I thought I needed 2 cans, and by getting that information, I only needed 1 can, I save way more money than I would ever pay on the assessment. So there's consumer information provided. If you go on the Paint Care website, there's terrific information for the consumers and mapping to find out where you can take it back. So you don't have to not know where you're going. And then the last thing, which we haven't even talked about, is the program has free bulk pickup. So for your paint contractors who end up with more, and this isn't going to be, end up more than 200 gallons left, they'll do free collection. Right. So there's a commercial benefit to this bill too, aside from the retail side of it, that will never be able to be incorporated into any county program whatsoever.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Casemeyer. And with apologies to colleagues, but since we are kind of the punning committee, if Ms. Casemeyer talked about someone looking for 2 cans, I think they need to be at a pet store. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you, Senator Kagan. Last question, I guess. This is Senator Hester, second bite of the apple. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I was just going to ask, last year we were told that the price ranged from 60 cents to $1.25 per gallon. And so it was up to 10% of the total cost of the cheapest can of paint, which, could be seen as a regressive fee. So could somebody provide the committee with some real data, on the states that have this, what the fee is and what
actually I dug out the table. So California, 75 cents, Colorado, 75 cents, Connecticut, 75 cents, Maine, 75 cents, Rhode Island, 75 cents, Vermont, 99 cents. So almost all the states have a 75 cent fee.
Okay, where's that table?
Well, let's see. I'll walk it around in a few minutes.
Thank you so much, Senator West. No more questions.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Senator Hester. In your packet, you do have unfavorable testimony from the Maryland Retailers Association, informational from the Maryland Department of Environment, and a bunch of other favorable written testimony, which you can refer to. That concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 143. Thank you, Senator West. We're going to proceed next to Senate Bill 365. This is Senator Simon Air's bill on state government, Maryland Veterans Commission, and membership. I see Senator Simon Air is here with us. Go ahead and proceed.
Senator Lamb.
Yeah.
Are we going over Senator Jennings' bill? Are we coming back to his bill?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. And
let me see here a second. I pulled them off the pile as they were ordered, but let me see if I can find that bill.
That's okay. And I just have something to tell you as well.
All right, well, we can go to 345. That's proper numerical order. This is Senator Jennings for agriculture right to engage in equine activities. I see Senator Jennings is with us. All right, go ahead, Senator Jennings, the sponsor of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Senator J.B. Jennings for Senate Bill 345. bill's pretty simple. Horses in Maryland go together like crabs in Old Bay. Our history is the entire Maryland history is baked into the equine industry going back to the Revolutionary War. When you look at the dinner stakes that took place in 1860s that eventually culminated to the Preakness that we now have, which is the middle leg of the Triple Crown. Equine is huge in this state. In fact, it's so big, it contributes over 28,000 jobs, $78 million in taxes, and $1 billion in spending in this state. There's over 100,000 horses in Maryland. There's more horses per square mile in Maryland than any other state, including Kentucky. When you look at the impact, over 705,000 acres are used for equine activities, which is about 10% of our land mass. And sometimes, people have issues with horses or there's other competing interests. And all this bill's doing is saying that it formally recognizes the vital role played by the state's equine equestrian industry by simply establishing that the intent of the General Assembly is that Marylanders have a right to engage in equine activities subject to regulations and restrictions under law. It doesn't go any further than that. It's just saying it's the intent of the legislature to recognize this. Very simple bill, and I just ask for favorable consideration.
All right, thank you, Senator Jennings. We have a panel. We don't actually have a sponsor panel.
We do, Senator Lamb. For some reason, it came late. So
okay.
Spiegel is the lead and Colby Ferguson is the other proponent.
Who was the lead again?
Jane Siegler.
All right, great. Thanks for clarifying that. We have lead sponsor witness, Ms. Jane Siegler. From the Maryland Horse Council, you have up to 5 minutes. You do not have to use the full time. Please be brief. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Senator Lamb, and I want to thank Senator Jennings, especially for sponsoring this bill for us. As he said, this bill is formal legislative recognition of the vital role played by the state's equestrians in Maryland's cultural heritage, social fabric, recreational resources, and environmental and economic health. In addition, the bill will add the weight of legislative intent when questions arise at the state and local level, which they frequently do, concerning land use and such issues such as resource allocation for parks and trails. Culturally, horses and horse sports have been part of Maryland life since before this nation was created. The Maryland Jockey Club, which was founded in 1743, is the oldest sporting organization of any type in North America, and the Preakness is older than the Kentucky Derby. Socially and recreationally, over 50% of Maryland households contain horse enthusiasts. The majority of our riders are trail riders. Each year, there are about 1,500 equine 4-H programs in the state, 55 high school equestrian teams, 22 pony clubs, and 12 college teams. The new Maryland 5-Star at Fair Hill is one of only 7 such events in the world. There are 200 equine organizations and almost 800 licensed stables, and 40 therapeutic riding programs that serve those with mental, physical, and developmental challenges, including wounded warriors and their families. Environmentally, a maintained pasture is second only to forest in its effectiveness in filtering runoff into local waterways and the Chesapeake Bay. And the equestrian community supports the conservation, preservation, and management of open space and natural resources using primarily private dollars. The senator talked about our great economic impact, so I won't go over that further, but I will say that we really hope that the committee will give this bill a favorable report.
All right, thank you, Ms. Siegler. Next, we will move to Mr. Colby Ferguson from the Maryland Farm Bureau. You have up to 2 minutes. Mr. Ferguson, we can't hear you, but it looks like you're talking. Can you try again? Nope, we can't hear you. All right, why don't we skip ahead to some of the other folks that are testifying, and if that works, we can come back to you, Ms. Ferguson. So next we have Kevin Addix with Grow and Fortify for oral testimony. You have up to 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Kevin Addix with Grow and Fortify, representing value-added agriculture in Maryland. Horses are a major component of value-added agriculture, and I will be very brief in saying that horses are great for open space. Horses are great for land preservation. Horses are a driver of activities and agritourism and recreation. Horses create jobs, a lot of jobs. Horses bring in a whole lot of tax revenue, and for those reasons and those stated prior, please support this bill. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Addix, for your brevity. Let's see, we have Karen Fulton from Full Moon Farm for oral testimony. Ms. Fulton, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yep, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Hey. Okay, great. Thank you. Hi, I represent Full Moon Farm LLC. We are a family-owned and operated horse farm here in beautiful Carroll County, Maryland, for the last 28 years. And I'm very happy to testify in strong support of Maryland's Right to Ride bill. We are one of over 700 licensed stables in the state of Maryland. There are a lot of horses here. We employ over 20 people, board over 30 horses for a variety of middle-class folks, and teach over 200 students per week. We have a huge community outreach with our horses. We do birthday parties, we do library visits with our miniature horses. We have Boy and Girl Scout field trips, summer camps, horse shows, and horse trials. For our nationally recognized competitions, we attract over 400 horse and rider combinations, which has a direct economic impact on our little corner of the state, as many of those people come from out of state and eat in our Carroll County restaurants and stay in our hotels. Our Full Moon Farm riders have also done well nationally. In 2021, we finished at the top of the leaderboard in 4 divisions, and that is the same national organization that has sanctioned the Maryland 5-star at Fair Hill, which is one of only 7 competitions at that level in the world. And Maryland has one of them, which we were very excited about. This was obviously done with a great deal of government support, so thank you for that. And we appreciate that. This permits our young students to be able to go an hour up the road and see the best riders in the world right here in Maryland. We look for a favorable report on this Right to Ride bill. Maryland is about horses, and we thank you for your hopefully favorable report.
All right, thank you, Ms. Fulton. Last witness, we have Mr. Colby Ferguson back. Hopefully audio is working this time. Can you hear?
As the Verizon man would say, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. You're all set. You're good to go.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Colby Ferguson on behalf of Maryland Farm Bureau, and we come in support. I'll be very brief. I think this bill, as Senator Jennings has said, very simple bill. Just gives the intent that we like horses and we want to see them stay and remain in the state of Maryland. And we obviously support this. We consider the equine industry to be part of the livestock industry and support it heavily each day and each year. We have a lot of members that are horse owners and horse riders, and we see this as a great opportunity to clarify the state intent. So with that, we do appreciate the opportunity to support House or Senate Bill 345.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ferguson. Nice background, very appropriate there. I see we have a question from Senator Pinsky. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the sponsor, this gives the right to engage in equine activities. I think we may have passed one right to engage in hunting. When we take up Sunday hunting, Senator, should either of these bills give us any direction in terms of how to set public policy for adjusting those people who want to ride in the morning and are fearful for their safety versus hunters who want to have the right to engage in hunting? We're always looking for advice and direction when we deal with those kind of quandaries in setting policy.
That's actually a good question. It's a tough question. One I've had to juggle myself, supporting Sunday hunting, but also supporting the equine industry. I have supported it in one county I live in, but I have opposed it in another county because the equine community has been more verbal and out there opposed to it. I I mean, this is something where I think the committee has to make the decision on that with regards to each Sunday hunting. And, you know, it's a compromise between the equine industry and the hunting industry. You know, this bill's not necessarily looking at that. This is more dealing with trail riding and, you know, issues we have through DNR and you know, zoning issues. And just, I can tell you, having been in agriculture, there's times somebody moves in, they get upset that there's horses they smell, or you name it. That's what we're trying to say with this, is that, you know, you have a right to equine as long as you are within the rules and regulations of your, you know, your local zoning and county and state laws. You know, that's the answer I'll give on that. I don't know if you want to ask some of the other committee member or panelists if they want to answer it.
That's fine. Thank you for your input.
All right, thank you, Senator Pinsky. Last question from Senator Kroza. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair, and thank you, Senator Jennings, for this bill. My district has a great combination of both the horse farms as well as the support for hunting. And you mentioned a little bit about the balance. For instance, in Somerset County, which is requested a Sunday hunting bill, we actually have horse owners who, you know, testified in support of the Sunday hunting. And if you explain, you mentioned a little bit about this balance. Can you just, when you mentioned the balance, were you talking about the different constituencies and specific to a geographic area? Is that how you were approaching it?
I think it is. I mean, I think, you know, even though, as I said, the number of horses throughout the state number over 100,000, you know, you have larger concentrations in different areas. I mean, example, Northern Baltimore County, I think, has the largest concentration of horses, and that's why the local equine industry, their community, got out and was opposed to the Sunday hunting. When you get more of a rural area such as Somerset, you know, there's less people necessarily riding down there versus the number of hunters. I mean, this is a tough one. As I said, you know, I have voted for Sunday hunting in one county, and I have voted against it in my other county I represent because of, you know, the equine industry and others coming out and giving me their opinions. So, you know, I think I'm going to have to kind of punt this to some of my panelists here who are from the equine industry to tell you their issues with it and their concerns. But when it comes to the Sunday hunting, I mean, that's stuff you have to take in consideration when you're dealing with that bill. It's before you, is looking at the actual county, the geographic area, how much, you know, I'll give you a quick question or a quick answer. You know, both in Baltimore, Harford, and Carroll counties, we have a lot of, you know, the term is fox hunting. Nowadays they call it fox chasing. This is what you used to think of the fox and the hound out there, you know, and they just run, and they have permission to run through, you know, their neighbors' fields and woods. And that's the concern when it comes to the Sunday hunting in that area. So it's pretty diverse. So
I appreciate that. We obviously don't have that in Somerset County, but I appreciate the geographic considerations. Thank you, Senator Jennings.
Okay.
All right, thank you. That concludes the testimony for Senate Bill 345. There is only favorable written testimony in your packet that you can reference. I'm going to step away for bill hearing and finance. I'll hand over back to Chairman Pinsky.
Thank you, Senator Lamb. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to Senate Bill 365, Senator Simon Air, Maryland Veterans Commission membership. We have very few witnesses. Senator Simon Air, followed by Jason Spiegel. There is no opposition. 365, Senator Simon Air.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senate Bill 365 is a very simple. It adds ROA, which is Reserve Organization of America, to the Maryland Veterans Commission. The commission advises the department on all matters pertaining to veterans. ROA has approximately 50,000 members, chartered by Congress and founded in 1922. ROA advises and educates Congress, the President, and the American people on national security with unique expertise on issues that affect 1.2 million men and women now serving in America's reserve components. This would benefit the Veterans Commission. I've been working with the Department of Veterans Affairs, and you should have our letter of support in your folder. I'll let my panel describe it in more detail, but I'll ask for a favorable consideration on Senate Bill 365.
Thank you, Senator. Let's go to Jason Spiegel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jason Spiegel, and I'm testifying on behalf of the 1,000 members of the Maryland Department of the Reserve Organization of America. We strongly support a favorable report on SB 365 as it would amend Maryland State Government Code Section 9-917 to add ROA as a member organization on the Maryland Veterans Commission. I want to thank Senator Simon Air for introducing the bill and for your consistent leadership and support of veterans issues. I also want to thank my delegate from District 17, Delegate Polakovich Carr, who introduced this bill on the House side. I am a life member of ROA and served as ROA's National Executive Director earlier in my career. I also represent ROA on the Board of Directors of the Maryland Military Coalition, and I'm authorized to state that the Maryland Military Coalition supports enactment of this bill. ROA is America's only exclusive advocate for the Reserve and National Guard, all ranks, all services. Both officers and enlisted personnel can join ROA, which includes members from all 8 uniformed services: Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, Space Force, Public Health Service, and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The Maryland Department of ROA provides a variety of services for currently serving reserve component personnel and veterans, including training, education, and mentorship for its junior members. Additionally, ROA offers a litigation support center for its members, which is particularly valuable for Reserve and National Guard personnel who experience problems with their civilian employers when they return from deployment or an active duty tour. Many Maryland National Guards, men and women, served on state or federal active duty to support our COVID relief efforts, and are currently deployed to the Middle East and elsewhere around the world. ROA's attorneys have filed amicus briefs with the U.S. Supreme Court in support of reserve personnel dismissed from civilian employment because of their military obligations. As a member of the commission, ROA will be able to give voice to the concerns of National Guard and Reserve personnel, including their reemployment after mobilization, pay, benefits, medical care, education, and other needed support. For those reasons, the Maryland Department of the Reserve Organization of America respectfully requests a favorable report on SB 365. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spiegel. Question for Senator Simon Air and Mr. Spiegel. Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on that legislation. Thank you both. We're going to move on to 368. Senator Wallstrecker, are you with us? Lamoria, is Senator Wallstrecker with us?
No, I don't see that he's with us. He knows that he was up, so I'm not sure.
Okay. Senator Kagan, can we go to your 373?
We sure can.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville, with Senate Bill 373, which passed the House unanimously last year, and then we got it too late to act on it. So if this is basically about transparency within the Department of Transportation, they are using a little bit of a fig leaf to not allow the public to have access to public information or information that should be public. It walks a fine line in terms of not disclosing too much, but allowing us to have access. What happened is, as you all probably have heard, regardless of where your district is, Governor Hogan has a proposal to widen the Beltway and 270 and put on toll roads and all that. Well, there were a bunch of people in a neighboring district that got letters from the Department of Transportation saying, we might come onto your property and we might take soil samples in case we decide to take part of your property. And a legislator decided that he wanted information on who got that so he could reach out and have communication. And it was denied based on the current MPIA, Maryland Public Information Act restrictions. And so we think that that kind of communication between legislators and their constituents is important, especially when you're talking about a government transparency issue. Certainly MDOT and no agency should be sharing social security numbers or emails or phone numbers. So this would just allow and require that entities like the Maryland Department of Transportation to share the names of people affected by and communicated with by an agency. So I was thinking about, so we just want to clarify this, that transparency is guaranteed, but the privacy is also respected. So after last week and my lots and lots of witnesses, this is just a super quick bill. I have one witness and I'm happy to take any questions, but I think this is not confusing or controversial. I am happy to take questions. Rebecca Snyder, thank you for being with me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Ms. Snyder.
Thank you, Chair Pinsky, and thank you, Vice Chair Kagan, for bringing this bill. It is a very simple, straightforward bill. It does three things to close loopholes in the PIA. It just clarifies that a distribution list does not include recipients of a notice of specific action and so forth. And we believe that these are just very specific and tailored steps to increase transparency. It solves a problem that has been experienced multiple times in the senator's district, and we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Questions for the bill sponsor or for Ms. Snyder? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on Bill 3.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Carozza, you have a question.
I apologize, Senator Carozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This one kind of snuck up on me, just trying to, I guess I'm trying to first understand. One of the witnesses said, you know, this is an issue that's been occurring in Montgomery County. I can tell you, I'm not aware of this. I'm trying to figure out what this bill is, what problem we're trying to resolve. And I guess I'm trying to understand if we are actually, my understanding of a PIA is that you can submit a request anonymously, but this seems to remove the rights of the privacy from citizens making the request. And it also is, it's only applying to one department. So my concern, and I guess because I'm coming late to the game and trying to understand the bill, if this was more of a casework constituent type issue that can be worked through without legislation, I'm just not, I don't understand the emergency and, you know, why we would remove the rights of privacy to those making the request.
Thank you for that. I'm tempted to throw it to Rebecca Snyder, but I will answer this, which is, first off, they're using the cover of law. And so we need a law to address and make transparency. The privacy is critically important. We do not want the department to share with anyone who submits an MPIA request, be it a legislator, a neighbor, an advocacy organization, or the local PTA. We do not want people's home address, phone number, email address, social security number, none of that should be shared. That will all stay private. But if there are a number of our constituents or of neighborhood who specifically through the Department of Transportation are getting notification that there may be people coming onto their property to test soil samples or other similar challenges, it seems to me like their legislators or the community should be able to know who is being approached in order to communicate and engage. And that's why it passed the House unanimously last year. The other thing is that when submitting the information, a request for that information, there has to be an oath saying, I'm not going to mark it off this list. I'm not going to share this list to make sure that there's no abuse. Rebecca, is there anything I missed that you'd add?
I think you covered it very well. Specifically, Delegate Carr had his problem was in North Chevy Chase in a proposed widening of the Beltway for toll lanes. This occurred back in 2019. He contacted MDOT. It's been this ongoing saga that even he has not been able to understand the footprint of MDOT's proposed widening of the Beltway. And so this, because MDOT was using this as sort of hiding that information under the sociological definition. And so although it doesn't, it has a wider, it forestalls the use of these sociological loopholes to shield information which citizens should have to understand what's happening in their community.
I guess I'm just still a little confused on, it just seems it's kind of a constituent casework related, applying to one department and an emergency bill. It just doesn't, I just am a little confused by that. So maybe we can talk offline with the Maryland Department of Transportation about it.
Thank you, Senator.
Further questions for the sponsor or Ms. Snyder? Seeing none, that concludes that hearing. Okay, I believe Senator Wallstreicher is with us. Yes, he is. So we're going to go to Senate Bill 368, Charter Amendments Notification. Senator Wallstreicher will be followed. I have his proponents. I'm not sure if he has a priority, but you can let me know after your testimony, yes, Senator. Welcome to the EHE.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your having me here today. Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, thank you as well. Today, we're dealing with an issue that you are very much familiar with. As many of you know, our municipal corporations need to provide certain notice in newspapers of record. And we have been struggling with this as a body for many, many years, as smaller newspapers in our community have shuttered. That includes papers like the Sentinel and the Gazette. And what that leaves is some of our larger players like the Washington Post and the Baltimore Sun to be the places where these municipal corporations place their notices. Now, this presents a couple of problems. The first is very few people continue to get physical newspapers, and so these notices are not being seen. The second thing is, as smaller newspapers have shuttered, these larger newspapers have local monopolies over these notices, and so the costs for our municipalities are very high. And so you've seen bills related to this, mostly along the lines of trying to move these notifications online. The problem with that solution, as much as I support some version of that, is that not everyone has access to the internet, and the digital divide could accidentally leave our most vulnerable citizens without access to information about the municipalities where they live. And so we have to find another solution here, or at least one of multiple solutions to the problems of diminishing local newspapers. And so I've worked with my municipalities as well as MML to come up with a really straightforward and simple idea. If a municipality is having a charter amendment, they can simply mail notification of that amendment so long as they mail it to every resident in their municipality. So if it's a small town, they can mail it out to every member of the town. And they could also include it in a newsletter so long as that newsletter is mailed to everyone. It also allows for personal delivery. So as long as the delivery is made to every member of that municipality, that would count for notice as well. This really wouldn't be terribly cost effective for our very large municipalities, including the municipalities you represent, Madam Vice Chair, but for very small municipalities, like the 9 municipalities in my legislative district, this is actually a very intimate, thoughtful, and effective way to get the word out related to charter amendments. And so I think it's a relatively straightforward bill, and my hope is that this committee can pass it favorably. Thank you, members of the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for the description. Senator, who would you like to be your prime? Do you have, I don't know if any.
Yeah, I'm sorry we did not put that down, but if MML would like to go first, they can speak most generally about this.
Okay, Mr. Fiore.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. Vice Chair Kagan, committee members.
My name is Justin Fiore, and I'm here on behalf of Maryland Municipal League in support of Senate Bill 368. As the name suggests, the purpose of a public notice is to engage and inform the public on the business being conducted so that they know where and how to share their input with elected officials that represent them. It's a core aspect of little d democratic government that we fully support. This proposed alternative will reach every single residence, and it won't cost them a subscription to access. Again, that's every single residence and for free. Newspapers have been the most effective and efficient method to disseminate local government information for the past few hundred years, but that is increasingly not the case for our small municipal governments. MML has long shared that one-size-fits-all approaches don't work in Maryland, and it doesn't make sense that Chevy Chase Village should have to pay $2,000 to advertise a charter amendment in the Washington Post. I understand there's an additional value to having newspapers report on government actions, and our members have always been open in these conversations to sharing a copy with the newspaper of general circulation. But as far as engaging and informing the public goes, this alternative process does that better than any newspaper advertisement, and it won't cost tiny governments large sums to achieve. We ask for a favorable report, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Fiore. Let's go to Bridget Donald Newton, the city of Rockville, of that multi-headed hydra of Gaithersburg, Rockville.
Good afternoon, Chair Pinsky and Vice Chair Kagan and members of the committee. I'm Bridget Donald Newton, Mayor of the city of Rockville, and I thank you for the opportunity to share the city's comments on SB 368. We are grateful to Senator Walt Stryker for sponsoring this important legislation. The Rockville Mayor and Council strongly support SB 368 as this legislation will provide needed relief for the city and other municipalities faced with increasingly high costs to notice proposed charter amendments, public hearings on planning and zoning issues, budgets, and other city business. It is unfortunate that there's no local print media still remaining in Montgomery County, and therefore the only option available to meet the noticing requirement is to place these legally required ads in a regional print newspaper, which is quite expensive due to the limited options. For FY22, Rockville has already spent almost $10,000 on legal noticing costs, and the small size of those ads placed in the newspaper's classified listings can be easily overlooked. SB 368 begins to address these issues by expanding charter amendment noticing options to include a copy of a fair summary of the proposed charter amendment delivered either by hand or mail once to every municipal residence. Under SB 368, the requirement can also be met by including the notice in a newspaper or other regular municipal publication. SB 368 is a welcomed improvement to a costly, antiquated, and inefficient process. This bill supports greater transparency and community engagement and will permit Rockville and other municipalities to expend more of our taxpayer resources on high-quality programs and services. For these reasons, we urge the committee to provide SB 368 with a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Newton. And let's go to Andy Leon Harney from Chevy Chase.
Good afternoon. My name is Andy Leon Harney, and I'm the village manager of Section 3 of the village of Chevy Chase. We're a very small community, just 282 homes. We are one of 157 municipalities in the state, many of them small enough to allow for hand delivery. And certainly mail delivery of charter amendments at a cost that would be far less than newspaper ads in some of the larger markets. We recently had a 2-sentence amendment to our charter. As the law stands, we were required to run an advertisement each week over 4 weeks in a newspaper of general circulation. Unfortunately, the law defines newspaper of general circulation as one that is offered for sale. In some jurisdictions like ours, that means the law required that we advertise the charter amendment in the only newspaper left standing. That requirement cost us $2,035 for a classified ad that was approximately 1 inch by 3 inches. If the idea is to disseminate a change to residents most affected, we did that. The change was discussed at a council meeting and printed on our website. The reasons for the change and the actual wording of the amendment were published in our monthly newsletter, which is delivered to each home in our village by mail. It seems unlikely that a paper the size of the Washington Post, the only local newspaper of general circulation in our area, or any of the residents read that very tiny ad. It's probably safe to say that our residents were more likely to read their own hometown newsletter or a hand-delivered postcard than the Friday classifieds. The option presented in this bill would give small municipalities and certain large media markets another option to both notify their residents and save money. In our region, the possible loss of revenue for a newspaper like the Washington Post is likely to be insignificant. I humbly ask you to consider my testimony and support these modest amendments to the existing law. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Mitchell, College Park Mayor Pro Tem, are you with us? I don't see you. Seeing not, are there any questions for the proponents before I get to the opponent? Yes, Senator Kagan. You're muted. You're muted, Vice Chair.
I never do that. Damn it. Thank you. I just have to welcome my former Chief of Staff, Justin Fiore from MML, Maryland Municipal League, and my mayor and constituent, Bridget Newton. So good to have you both in EHE. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Let's go to the opposition. Ms. Snyder is back with us. Rebecca Snyder.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. For the record, I'm Rebecca Snyder with the Maryland Delaware DC Press Association. And we, although we're in discussion with Delegate Solomon on this bill to try and work out a compromise, I admit I have not spoken to Senator Waldstreicher on this topic yet. And, you know, we believe that more notice is better notice. Hand delivering to every piece, to every household in a municipality is a great way to serve notice to a certain point. The charter amendments that are being discussed are the big ticket items. They're, you know, they are the building blocks of a municipal government. And so when we look at best practices around public notice, we want to look at independence of the entity that is publishing. So that's why it's historically been in news media. We also want to look at verifiability, archivability, and accessibility. So this, I mean, this bill is you're hand delivering the postcard in some municipalities. There's a lot to be said for that. But the independence is always going to be a real problem in terms of this best practice. I would also say that your newspapers of general circulation, although I'm sympathetic to the 250 count neighborhood that we've all papered or delivered flyers to, going to a large regional publication, the reach of that publication is immense, and it's not just print, it is online. The Press Association also aggregates all public notices online as well. So I think this is a statewide solution to a really specific problem. I do want to continue the discussions with Delegate Solomon, and I hope Senator Waldstreicher will be interested in talking about it as well, so that I hope we're not as far apart as we could be on this. Thank you.
Senator Riley.
Thank you very much. Ms. Snyder, I have a question for you. Is it accurate to say that municipalities, like political campaigns, pay the full rate of the print charges?
To be honest, I don't know. I wish I could say that I understand. I see some nodding heads from the Chevy Chase representative. That is, I don't get into knowing what people's rate structures are. I would imagine that the Washington Post is more expensive than the Montgomery Sentinel was. I don't know how it compares to political advertising or anything like that.
Sure. As a proposed amendment, you may want to have a discussion with the sponsors to have a sliding scale based on the target market they have. We don't want to use taxpayer money to subsidize newspapers, magazines, etc. But the handwriting's on the wall that without some adjustments, this pressure to go all electronic or all manual is going to continue to grow. I was on the Anne Arundel County Council 14 years ago. We had this very same discussion. Capital newspaper, which isn't that expensive, but it is a growing problem. You agree with that?
Well, I think you're looking at total audience, and it is, you know, the world changes. I think when we look at the best practice of public notice, independence is the key. archivability, accessibility. So there are an audience, and usually your news media publication, and they do their public notices in print and online, satisfy that best. So, I mean, it's an ongoing discussion, and we believe that citizens need to know about what's happening in their community. So we feel like the press is a good watchdog of that, but I thank you for your comment.
Following up, if I may, look, I'm more in the loss of newspapers around the country. My brother was in journalism for 30 years. But ads from municipalities are not the reason that newspapers are going under or having to tighten their belts. You know, as hedge funds start to buy them up like Alden did and others, it's a major problem. That being said, if public notification is really crucial and a small municipality can hand deliver to everybody in the community, it's probably better saturation than the percentage of people who read a major newspaper. I would assume that the conversation happening with Delegate Solomon and now Senator Wallstreicher is about maybe slicing and dicing and have maybe municipalities under certain size would be covered by this and larger ones not. So while I've been a strong supporter of keeping strong foundations for newspapers, including revenue, if it really is about education and publicizing, if we have some sure ways of doing it, we should be very thoughtful and considerate of that.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, we hope negotiations continue. That concludes the hearing on
Senator Ellis had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and that was my fault. I'm just coming over from a bill hearing from finance. I'm getting reacclimated. And Senator Wallstreicher, thank you for this bill. We have a similar bill coming up from Charles County because our local newspaper moved out of the county, and they have this similar desire. One thing we worked with the Charles County commissioners on is to, they have this wonderful citizen notification system, text messages that go out. And we wondered if they could include that as far as a notification for county actions, which also have to go into currently newspapers. So what do you think about that, Senator Wallstreicher, or similar system with your jurisdictions?
Thank you for that question, Senator Ellis. I think we'd like to focus on manual notification through the mail or through physical delivery. I appreciate the opportunity that text messaging may provide, and of course, voicemails and phone calls as well. But it does raise the issue that has been raised before this committee prior, which is a digital divide and notification to those who might not have access to those technologies. And so I am happy to continue that conversation with this committee, but as to this specific piece of legislation, I think we'd like to keep it focused on hand delivery and mail.
Okay. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Ellis. That concludes, once again, the issue of notice. Senator Wallstreicher, thank you. The witnesses, thank you all. Now we're going to 372. If I postponed it, I would probably be tarred with recalcitrant and procrastinating. So with that, this is environment, coal tar sealant products prohibitions. We have Senator Kagan, and Senator Kagan, you will have to, well, actually, I'm going to hand this over to Senator Lamb, who's got a better and more up-to-date list than I do. So we'll call on Senator Kagan and then Senator Lamb, back to you.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay. Go ahead, Senator Kagan, as a sponsor.
Thank you so much. For the record, Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. So if you knew that there was a product that was so toxic that Lowe's wouldn't carry it, that Home Depot or Ace Hardware wouldn't carry it anymore because of fear of being sued, that the American Medical Association 6 years ago recommend be banned, and yet it's not yet banned in Maryland. Senate Bill 372 proposes to create a statewide ban on coal tar sealants. So if you all may remember this bill from last year, it came over from the House where it passed, got out of our committee, and got to the floor on the very last day of our 90-day session. So we didn't have time to focus on this, and now we do. So this is incredibly toxic stuff. We use it to brighten our driveways or parking lots, but the problem is that it has enormous levels of PAHs, which are polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. So from here, I will call them PAHs, but know that it's a toxic chemical. So if you put that on your driveway to make your driveway look nice, and then you walk into your house walking on the driveway, or you take your pooch for a walk and it's then the stuff is on the bottom of your cute pooch's paws, it gets tracked into your house. Now, the short-term effects of PAHs include eye and skin irritation, nausea, diarrhea, kind of like, okay, not ideal stuff. We could kind of live with that, but worth avoiding. The long-term exposure, though, can lead to asthma-like symptoms, decreased immune functions, cataracts, organ damage, or cancer. So it also has a bad effect on the environment. It causes a slower rate of growth in salamanders, of all things, impaired development of frogs, liver damage in fish, and decrease in the population of crabs, clams, and oysters. And I know the senator from the shore would be especially worried about that. So what happens if we were to ban this? First off, there are alternatives, and they are affordable and accessible and available. So among those are asphalt-based sealants that don't have the chemical challenges, gilsonite, acrylic seals, and agricultural oil-based seals. So all of those are available right now. We will hear also about how this has already been banned in Anne Arundel County, in Howard County, in Montgomery, and Prince George's County. And that is all because of its toxicity, because it's actually hard to find at our local hardware stores, and because there are such great affordable alternatives. So according to the Sierra Club, they talk about how coal tar has 1,000 times higher PAH levels than asphalt. That's extraordinary. And I just want to flag for you two things that you might hear from opponents. One is Sealmaster that says that there's an insignificant amount of PAHs in coal tar, which is not borne to be true by any scientific study. And speaking of seal tar, I want to flag for you that, we may hear this from a witness afterwards, there was a letter from the president of Sealmaster in Wisconsin and Minnesota. In Minnesota, where it's been banned, and Wisconsin, where it's banned in a lot of the counties. And it says that they recommend to all of their contractors in those two states that for contractors for national accounts and government entities, that they require only asphalt-based sealers because they offer more benefits with no cost disadvantage. They also say that states or areas where high PAH sealers have been banned have not suffered any financial hardship or lost value in their pavement. The last thing I will mention is there's a question about, oh, is this going to kill jobs? And I can tell you that there is a Sealmaster guy in Maryland, in Cockeysville, and we are so careful about losing jobs. So first off, in this bill, which is a little bit narrower, a little bit more collaborative with folks who had questions from last year, they can continue making this evil stuff in the state of Maryland if they choose to do that. But they raise the specter of lost jobs from applicators. To be clear, applicators would still have their jobs. They would still apply driveway sealant in driveways and in parking lots. They just wouldn't use this toxic, deadly stuff that's so bad for our public health and for the environment. They would use one of the other alternatives, and continue their work. So my witness, Mr. Chair, I will just also say Minnesota banned coal tar, New York banned coal tar, Maine banned coal tar, as well as the state of Washington. And this is from the president of US Seal International, who describes himself as Republican, who has been working with coal tar and whose father started a coal tar business 40-something years ago. And he believes that we should be banning it. This is our opportunity to do the right thing and protect our constituents. And with that, Mr. Chair, thank you for letting me present this bill. I look forward to hearing from my witnesses and taking questions afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. This bill does look familiar. We will start with our lead sponsor witness, which is Mr. Robert Archie from ASMA, which I assume is Asphalt Seal Coat Manufacturers Association. Mr. Archie, you have up to 5 minutes as the lead sponsor. You do not need to use all that time. To encourage you to please be brief. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Vice Chair Senator Kagan. I'm speaking in favor of this bill. I'm the president of ASMA USA, which stands for the Asphalt Seal Coat Manufacturers Association, and that's been around since the early 90s. And when we started that organization, it was to straighten up all of the misconceptions that were going on the West Coast, where asphalt emulsion products are being used. That's 40 years ago. 40 years ago, we started making asphalt-based seal. Why did we do that? We did that because we were tired of getting burned, our skin getting burned from coal tar all over our arms. It didn't bother you at first. And I'm a veteran of being in the emergency room a number of times. It isn't 40 years ago my dad started this business. It's the late 1940s. And in the late 50s, even though I was a young kid, I was out there with my dad on the driveway just as a kid, putting it down. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was there. I was there when he was paving Route 66 in the 60s. I didn't know what I was doing then, but I was there too. So I have a lot of experience in this. I doubt, unfortunately, that anybody in this room has as much experience as I do because I'm 70 years old. So having said that, let me tell you what we did about this. Us and 4 other manufacturers on the West Coast decided to make a better product, something safer, something that didn't burn us, something that didn't burn your lungs, as this stuff did when you inhaled it. And we came up with asphalt emulsion seal coats. In the very beginning, they were raw, they were simple, but they've evolved. And all of these years, there's over 100 million people live on the West Coast. Why are all of us using asphalt emulsion, but the East Coast refuses to do it? Now, I can tell you that Sealmaster, since you spoke about them, they do make an asphalt emulsion seal coat, and I believe it's a pretty good product. So I don't know why they want to make coal tar. I wouldn't have a clue. You'd have to ask him that. But I know that we don't. None of us want it. We have plants in 11 states. All of those plants came into coal tar territories, and immediately the contractors migrated over to the asphalt-based products. Why? Because they didn't want to be burned. They didn't want to have it on their equipment that they couldn't get it off. They didn't want to have it on their clothes. They didn't want it on their skin, and they didn't want to go home smelling like they just walked out of a tar factory. And they don't with asphalt. Is it still there next year? You betcha it is. Now, unless you're going to be one of those people that does what my dad used to say when I was a kid, use the money wand, the water hose. So you go and buy sealer and you don't dilute it the proper method. You over dilute it, and you've done it to save money. That's what you're doing, and you're wasting people's money and their time. And so I see that whenever I come out to the East Coast. In all of those places where we have plants, all of those contractors are all now using asphalt emulsion, and they've all told us they will never go back to using coal tar, never. So I'm not waging a war on coal tar. In fact, I'm probably the oldest guy around that ever used it, but I don't want to use it anymore. And I don't want to be sick from it. I spent weeks in the hospital from the burning. We never knew that it could burn you as bad as it did. And I remember when we were doing Disney World in the 70s, and being young guys, we took our shirts off, we were wearing shorts. We got overspray because the wind came up and got it on us. It didn't seem to bother us at first. By later in the day, we were burning something awful. You know how you got it off? Xylene. That's the only way you could get coal tar off your body or anything else. Xylene, one of the most destructive chemicals, explosive chemicals, and that's what you had to use to get it off you and your equipment. When you use asphalt emulsion seal coats, you can seal in a relatively fast time after you've paved the parking lot. When you use coal tar, you have to wait 90 days for it to cure. So let's be clear about this. Asphalt emulsion is not part of paving materials. It is not a wonder drug. It's been around since the 40s. It doesn't do anything but surface coat a pavement to protect it from UV radiation the chemicals and the weather. That's all it does. And so does asphalt emulsion. But guess what? There's no residual effects that come along with it. So I would say to you that if you switch to asphalt emulsion, you will not have these possible claims that are going to come down the pipe at you, because they will when a woman is walking down the street with her baby carriage and the guy is spraying it with a spacesuit on and she wonders why he's doing that and she's not protected. You're going to see that kind of stuff come your way. It's already happened in Minnesota. They banned it in 2014 just because of that reason. So I would say to you, thank you very much for your time. I hope I've helped in some small way. And if you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Archie. Next on the sponsor panel, we have Mr. Matt Peterson from the Baltimore Jewish Council. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you so much, Senator, and thank you, members of the committee. My name is Matt Peterson on behalf of the Baltimore Jewish Council, here in favor of this bill to finally ban coal tar sealant products. We've heard plenty about how destructive these are to our environment, to our community, to young children who are playing on carpet, and inhaling this toxic stuff that is tracked in on the bottom of people's feet. I mean, if we knew, we've banned asbestos, we've taken care of lead. I mean, this is a product that is just as toxic and also should not have a place in our environment. So on behalf of the Jewish community, we support initiatives that will help repair our world and repair our public domain, and this is exactly a bill that will help us do that. So we urge a favorable report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, short and sweet. So last witness on the sponsor panel is Mr. Tom Ennis with Coal Tar Free America. Mr. Ennis, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes.
Great. Tom Ennis. I work with Coal Tar Free America. I helped the city of Austin in my day job to pass the nation's first ban back in 2005. I also helped defend that ban from the industry, as well as start the first enforcement program. You can see my background here. I just included this. This is out of Loudoun County, Virginia. And this is what happens when citizens look to their government for good advice and good, so they don't have to wade through all these technical issues. This is a neighborhood that was sort of pitted against each other when they found out coal tar sealant was going to be put down in their neighborhood, and big fights ensued. People moved, hurt feelings, and all that sort of thing. That's what happens because this is not one of those things when you put it down on your property, it doesn't stay there. It wafts over to your neighbor. You put it on your business. You're not putting a sign out declaring you're putting a toxic product down, etc. So it's a problem. Here's several quotes that I have for you about this, and I've got tons of research I could go into. Jared Littman, 2.5 miles from you at K&B True Value, was on the board of directors of True Value, and he led the charge to ban this product. So it followed, just like Home Depot and Lowe's, they decided not to use it there. So he's a businessman. He represents a whole district of local businesses, and he decided to ban it. And then you had in Montgomery County, you had Craig Rice, and Montgomery County Council said, very similar to the sponsor, Senator Kagan said, if it's not good enough for Home Depot and Lowe's, it's not good enough for our community. And I'll take any questions if you have.
Thank you, Mr. Ennis. We have one more favorable witness, and that's Ms. Emily Ranson from Clean Water Action, who will take, and then we'll take questions from the proponents. Ms. Ranson, are you there?
I am. Good afternoon, Chairman Pinsky, members of the committee. I am Emily Ranson with Clean Water Action, here in support of Senate Bill 372. I just want to reiterate that the alternatives without coal tar are widely available, and jurisdictions within Maryland have already taken action to ban the sealants containing coal tar. And that coal tar is a toxic material that is linked with various human health defects, but then also for our wildlife and aquatic life. So urge a favorable report, and thank you.
All right, thank you for your brevity. I see 2 questions. We can start with Senator Pinsky.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chairman. And I apologize because I had to step away for a moment for a meeting. As I read the bill, it restricts high PAH over 10% of 1/10%. But then it says later on in the bill, you can only sell if it's below 0.005 of a percent. And I'm trying to understand, what about in between? Unless I'm missing something here. And as a follow-up question of that, is an LP, is that low PAH? And is that allowed? And is the standard of 0.0005 an accepted standard? Or does that make it more like an asphalt emulsion?
I'm going to toss to Mr. Ennis, who's really the technical person, unless Mr. Ritchie wants to cover it.
So an LP product, to answer your question, first part of that question, is a liquid petroleum product. It is products that, and just to clarify, I'm part of a national testing program working with the EPA, DC, and state of Maryland on developing testing standards for these products. LP products are high in PAHs, but they contain no coal tar. So the industry's come up with these products that are about 2% PAH, and coal tar is around 5 to 7%. The distinction on the sale, I was under the understanding that you were going to be able to sell coal tar anywhere. So I apologize for not knowing the nuance of that language in the bill, but in essence, anybody below 0.1% should be able to apply it, and anybody who makes any kind of seal coat can sell it outside the state. This is my understanding of the intent of this bill.
Well, let me follow up. And again, I have zero expertise in this, just I've received some letters on this. It's my understanding, so you're reading the bill would allow liquid petroleum to be sold and applied or not?
Mr. Chair, I spoke briefly to this, but I think you were away. There is a business in Cockeysville, Maryland that makes coal tar. And so we are making it clear that they can continue to manufacture. If that's what they do, we are not having this be a job kill. They just aren't going to be able to sell it or have it applied in the state of Maryland if this bill were to become law.
Right, but I thought I heard from Mr. Ennis, liquid petroleum was distinct.
The class of, if some people call them LP sealers, and there's a lot of, that's the sort of challenge in this industry, is when we have 10 different terms for the same product. But something that has on the chemistry of it is steam cracked asphalt or ethylene cracked residue. Any product we've ever tested has too many PAHs in it and would not be legal to be used and applied in the state of Maryland under this bill.
Even though, at least according to one person who's in this industry, says LPs are 90% lower in PAHs.
No, they're like light beer. It's a third less is what all it is. It's just a third less PAH.
Only a third less.
Right.
And let me ask another question again from some of the letters I received on this. Some people in the industry say the asphalt emulsions are only 50% effective, and it means redoing it more frequently, whereas the LP loses about 10% from the high PAH and is 90% effective. Is that not right?
That's not right. In fact, one of the papers that I did see, someone said you're going to increase carbon emissions because of all the pavement's going to fall apart. Just like Mr. Archie was saying, you know, roads aren't falling and parking lots aren't falling apart in California. They're fine. So this is a product. These products are available, and these LP products are high in PAH and not necessarily and should not be used. It doesn't mean that in the future, if somebody came up with a formulation that had less than 0.1% PAHs using LP as a base ingredient, that would be legal. The regulation is about a percentage of PAH, not based on the ingredients. So anything you put in there, as long as it's not high in PAH.
And how long has California been implementing this?
It's not a ban. It's actually, there's remnants of coal tar use on the West Coast, but it's down probably from 15 years ago. It was probably 25%, and it's diminished over time. So it's not, but it's but as Mr. Archie said, he knows that industry in California better than I do, but it's still present. You can still buy it. You still apply it legally, but it's just not done very often.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Acting Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Senator Pinsky. Next, we have Senator Hester.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank the vice chair for sponsoring this bill. There were students in a middle school that have brought this the past couple of years to the committee, and they've been so dogged. I think they're now all in high school, but I just want to pick up this bill and give a shout out to all those children back in Howard County who brought this bill for 3 years at least.
Thank you, Senator Hester. And I know you were asking whether I worked with them at all, and I did. We had a wonderful Zoom, and they are grown up and thoughtful and professional and continue to be as smart and diligent and effective as they were when they started, when they were younger. So thank you. You should be very proud of them, and so should Senator Lamb. Thank you.
Yes, they're great students from Ellicott Mills Middle School. So thank you.
They're in high school now. Amazing.
Time has flown by.
Your baby, Senator Lamb.
So that ends the proponents. We have folks that are signed up as opponents to this piece of legislation. We will start with Mr. Josh White from Perry White, Ross, and Jacobson, assuming you're representing someone. So Mr. White, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I'm Josh White on behalf of Pavement Coatings Technology Council, which opposes Senate Bill 372. The fact is, the science does not support this bill. No regulatory agency, including OSHA, EPA, MDE, has ever taken steps to ban these products. The EPA has never classified refined coal tar pavement sealer as a hazardous material, and all the bans are due to a U.S. Geological Survey foundational study that pointed the finger at sealants. But it wasn't until last October, it took a ruling by the DC Circuit Court to force the USGS to hand over the data for peer review, which is now in question. The fact is, whenever sealants have been banned, there's been no impact on the level of PAHs in the environment. In other words, there's no correlation. Moreover, no scientific evidence that children or adults are at risk if they stand or touch dry pavement sealant. Sealants coat the inside of pipes that distribute drinking water and are critical product to wastewater treatment systems. Maryland pavement sealing industry has an excellent safety environmental record, and many of these folks have worked for decades manufacturing an application, and there's no reported cases of lost worker illness due to the product composition. If sealants are as harmful as advocates say, why have they amended the bill in the House to permit manufacturing and out-of-state distribution of the product? Advocates say that manufacturing exemption will protect a few dozen jobs in the union jobs in Baltimore City. However, that doesn't help the hundreds of applicator jobs throughout the state who would be at risk, and that makes no sense. So we just urge an unfavorable report on this bill. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. White. Next, we have Mr. Tom Decker from Sealmaster. Mr. Decker, are you there? I see you there. You have 2 minutes. You need to unmute yourself. There you go.
There we go.
Go
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Tom Decker, president of Sealmaster in Cockeysville, Maryland. And we manufacture pavement sealer in Cockeysville. A third of our pavement sealer we manufacture is coal tar. About 37% is the LP base, which is used primarily in the counties where it's been banned, and about 30% asphalt base. If I were to ask every member of the EHE committee to provide me with the name of at least one of their constituents who has become sick, had to miss work, developed cancer, or filed a lawsuit for being exposed to coal tar pavement sealer, they can't. If I ask them to provide me with the name of a toddler or a child who was exposed to coal tar sealer, crawling across a driveway or playing on a driveway, they couldn't. If I asked them to provide me with an example where coal tar sealer being applied to any parking lot or driveway in Maryland caused a fish kill, polluted a pond, stream, lake, or the Chesapeake Bay, they couldn't because it's never happened. From the early 1960s until coal tar was banned in Washington, D.C. in 2009, homeowners could purchase 5-gallon pails of coal tar to seal coat their own driveways. For fear of being sued, coal tar in 5-gallon pails is no longer carried by Home Depot, Lowe's, or Ace Hardware, and has been replaced by these less durable asphalt emulsions. These companies never were sued, however. I have workers' comp reports dating back to 2004, 10 years of workers' comp reports from Cooper's Creek Chemical, who we buy our coal tar from in Pennsylvania. I have 10 years worth of comp reports from a large paving and seal coating contractor located in Laurel, Maryland, whose employees safely applied coal tar sealer for 40 years until the bans in the 4 counties in Maryland forced them to switch from coal tar to the LP-based sealer. In all of those reports spanning all of those years, there was not a single claim for a day of work missed due to being exposed to raw coal tar base or coal tar pavement sealer. What I've revealed to you so far is factual information that clearly shows that manufacturing, applying, or owning a property that has coal tar pavement sealer on it poses no danger to any citizen in the state of Maryland. What is the value?
Your time has expired. Thank you.
Okay.
Next, we have unfavorable verbal testimony from Ann LaHurry from the Pavement Coatings Technology Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. So as you say, I'm Ann LaHurry, and I have over 30 years of experience as a PhD geochemist with a focus on environmental science and risk assessment. And I speak to you today to oppose SB 372 as the science advisor to the Pavement Coatings Technology Council. In the 10 years or so since the similar bans of refined coal tar-based sealant began to be proposed in Maryland by individual counties and then by the state, the science that demonstrates the de minimis health or environmental risks associated with exposure to the sealants has only gotten stronger. That is that the risk is minimal at best. In March of 2021, the US EPA finalized its most recent review of the relevant science and, as in the past, once again declined to place any restrictions on the use of coal tar-based or any other sealants containing PAHs. To clarify a common misconception, coal tar is not identified as a federal hazardous waste. In part, this is because it does not fail an EPA test called the toxicity characteristic leaching procedure. It doesn't result in toxicity in the environment or to people. Much misinformation has been presented to this committee, but to me, the most surprising is the conclusion that the standard should be orders of magnitude lower than the nationwide standard for safe drinking water. To summarize, the science does not support banning these sealant products, and I'd be happy to address any questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Ms. LaHurry. Next, we have Mr. Victor Davis. This is opposition testimony from the Pavement Depot of Maryland. Mr. Davis, are you there? I see you there. You're unmuted, but we can't hear you. You there?
Can you hear me now?
Yep, now we can.
Yep.
Go ahead.
All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, so my name is Victor Davis, Pavement Depot, Maryland. I own that with me and my wife, Teresa Davis. I was kind of Are we talking about banning coal tar, or are we talking about, I'm kind of confused. I know last year there was an amendment put in banning all sealers that contain pHs, but now I'm confused. So I need clarification.
Typically, the witnesses don't ask the questions of the committee.
Okay,
Why don't you go ahead and proceed with your testimony?
All right,
and then,
I'll proceed. I'll proceed. I have to change everything up, but the LP sealants that Mr. Ennis and Mr. Archie were talking about, they are a low pH, a PAH sealant. They're 90% less coal tar at 10,000 parts per million, where coal tar is 100,000 parts per million. Asphalt emulsions are 1,000 parts per million. Asphalt emulsions, from what I've tested and what I've seen, work well in places like California, Arizona, but not so well on the East Coast. In the Mid-Atlantic area, we have freeze thaw, which and weather issues that cause the AE not to work so well. Bottom line is this amendment, so with no amendment, I would be okay with. But if there's an amendment banning LP, then I wouldn't be.
Okay, that concludes your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Davis. I see
It does. I was kind of thrown to it. I thought it was amended, so I apologize. I'm not prepared.
Okay, not a problem. Thank you, Mr. Davis. I see we have a question from Senator Hester. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just was trying to square two things. Why would Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace Hardware, and others ban the sale of the coal tar products in their stores? That's my first question. And then my second question is, they were stated that there was no evidence of people getting sick from this. And I'm just hoping that somebody could share some actual data with the committee between now and the voting session. Thank you.
And want to go ahead.
Yeah, well, I can address the first question about Home Depot and Lowe's. They decided not to carry, they carry tens of thousands of products. Everybody knows if you've been to Lowe's or Home Depot. But when the city of Austin, which actually, according to Mr. Ennis's website, paid him in part to proselytize on behalf of bands nationwide, that as part of that, the city of Austin essentially said to Lowe's and Home Depot, as did activists around the country, we will boycott you, we'll give you bad publicity. And so that was the fear of lawsuits that they were addressing. It had nothing to do with the safety of the product. As to the second question, I think Mr. Decker, you could submit some of the information about your medical records and your insurance records to Senator Hester and the committee.
Yeah, Senator Hester, I'm talking about reality in the state of Maryland, not California, not Minnesota, not Austin, Texas. I have workers' comp claims reports that I can send everybody on this committee. Nobody has gotten sick in 25 years working in my manufacturing plant. My children, my wife is an ICU nurse. My children have worked here every summer. So there's just no truth to what these fears are. Nobody's gotten sick. Nobody's a fear. I have 3 women that work here. There's been 3 babies born here. They're perfectly healthy. So I don't know where it's coming from. And the reason we sell coal tar and LP is because it works in our weather here. And we sell what our customers what our customers and the property owners demand that works, not what we think that they should use so they can be environmentally correct. So
thank you,
nobody's
Mr.
getting
Decker.
hurt. Nobody's getting hurt. Nobody's getting sick. There's no evidence of any of that in Maryland. There's nobody. So that's why I'm standing up for this so strongly.
Thank you, Mr. Decker. And I don't think I need to see all the workers' comp records. I believe you. I was just wondering if somebody on the proponent side, has any evidence that if we could just see that, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator Hester. There is favorable written testimony that's in your packet. There's also a letter of information from the Maryland Department of Environment. That concludes the bill hearing for Senate Bill 372. Thank you, Senator Kagan, for this bill. We will move on to the next bill on the docket for the committee. This is also Senator Kagan, Senate Bill 373, Public Information Act required denials.
Senator Lamb, we finished that bill.
We finished that bill. All right. Then we will proceed to Senate Bill 381. And that's Senator Smith. I see that he's joined us as well. This is Natural Resources, Wildlife Trafficking, and Prevention. Senator Smith, as a sponsor of the bill, you can go ahead.
All right, excellent. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Mr. Chair and Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, this is Senator Smith. I'm testifying on behalf of Senate Bill 381, the Wildlife Trafficking and Prevention bill. So this bill, the idea for this bill actually came to me from a delegation mate from Montgomery County, Delegate Sarah Love, and we had a great discussion. This bill's been before the legislature before, not in its current posture. But one aspect of it that appealed to me or that interested me was the national security aspect. And some of the information that was shared with me is that wildlife or illegal wildlife trafficking and the trade is actually the fourth largest type of crime in the world after drugs and human trafficking. And it said that between $7 and $23 billion in profit is made off of this illegal wildlife trafficking every year. A lot of this money goes to fuel not only terrorist organizations, but terrorist activity. And this is something that terrorism finance was something that I deal with in the reserves. And so this is it kind of keen, had a keen interest in this from the start, from the national security perspective. But also right here in Maryland, that same trade also funnels and fuels that same type of terroristic activity. And so Senate Bill 381 complements federal law, two specific pieces of legislation, which we'll discuss a little bit later, that prohibits the sale of these illegal species and some of the products that are derivatives of this trade in the United States. So these bans are particularly critical for coastal states like Maryland due to the potential for illegal wildlife products to enter through our ports. We have a tier 1 port here in Baltimore, and Maryland and Baltimore would serve as a safe harbor for these imports and sales that would then go quickly to New York City, to Washington, D.C., and up and down the eastern seaboard. So for the mechanics of the bill, what the bill does is it prohibits a person from purchasing, selling, offering for sale, or possessing with the intent to sell any item that the person knows or should know is a covered animal species. And a full list of that species, of those lists, can be found on page 3. I thought this was a drafting error at first, or that a drafter is kind of poking fun, but mammoth is also listed there. And to my mind, mammoths have been extinct for 4,000 years. But it's because there's a hard distinction between some of the tusks, and you have some of the experts that will come behind me and explain this distinction, but it's hard to discern between mammoth and current species. So that's why that's in there. And so the covered animal species, it's a part or a product that means any item that could contain or wholly or partially that's made from that animal species. And the sell, it does not include the non-monetary transfer of ownership by way of gift or donation, or if it was bequeathed to you. And then it sets up the violation scheme. So the penalties, they're all misdemeanors, fines. Those can be found on page 6. And then in the fiscal note takes care to note that the DNR can implement the bill with the existing budgeted resources. And then a number of these species are already actually covered under federal law, and some of the things that the state already implements. So can be handled with existing resources is the underscore there. I'll note, Mr. Chairman and Madam Vice Chair, that there is an amendment in the packet. The amendment goes to page 5, which just adds in terms of where you could sell these products. It adds in a zoo or an aquarium that provides educational or scientific services that is accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. My cross-file worked out the language for this amendment with the zoo and the aquarium. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will rest and stand by for questions. And I ask for a favorable committee report.
All right, thank you, Senator Smith. We have, it doesn't look like we have any unfavorables, just for the awareness of the committee and also the panelists. We will go to our lead sponsor witness. This is Ms. Catherine Kohlberg from the Humane Society of the United States. Ms. Kohlberg, are you there?
Yes,
if you are, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Catherine Kohlberg. I'm the Director of Marine and Wildlife Protection at the Humane Society of the United States and a resident of Silver Spring. We urge you to support SB 381, a bill to ban the sale of parts and products from imperiled species. Many thanks to Senator Smith for introducing this important piece of legislation. HSUS undercover investigations in 2017 and in late 2021 found imperiled animal parts and products for sale across Maryland, including elephant ivory pendants, beaded necklaces and figurines, giraffe bone lamps, and jaguar fur pieces. Our 2021 investigation was released just last week and uncovered elephant ivory products for sale at 20 Maryland retailers across the state, including in Kensington, Annapolis, Hagerstown, Frederick, and other locations. Several sellers told the investigator, "We're not supposed to say it's ivory," when questioned. When asked by the investigator, none of the sellers had the information or documentation to verify the age or origin of the ivory, which is required under federal law for antiques. And some of the ivory was labeled with misleading or false information. Without such documentation, it is just impossible to know whether the items were imported in violation of federal law. It is also extremely difficult to tell if an undocumented piece of ivory is antique just by looking at it, or if it is from newly poached elephants. And illegal ivory is being sold under the guise of legal ivory. Antique dealers who dyed new ivory with tea to make it appear older than it was have recently been prosecuted in other states. This investigation demonstrates the urgent need for a state law, as both buyers and sellers are unwittingly contributing to the poaching crisis. Buyers should not be responsible for navigating the patchwork of laws governing ivory and other imperiled parts and products, thus the need for state level laws. And to clarify, people can continue to possess heirlooms and pass them down. The purpose of this bill is to eliminate the financial incentive by banning the commercial sale of these items. We've all seen the horrifically cruel pictures of how ivory is obtained. Elephants and rhinos are slaughtered for their ivory and horns, often while they're still alive. Babies with tiny tusks are not spared. SB 381 covers 14 species in addition to elephants. All of the species are at risk of extinction and have declining populations throughout the ranges. Each year, as many as 15,000 elephants are killed in Africa to supply the demand for their ivory. A recent report found the population of savanna elephants has declined by 60%, forest elephants by more than 86% since the 70s, placing them just a step or two away from extinction. Evidence shows that the US is a significant destination market for giraffe specimens, and all species of sea turtles are threatened with extinction. These statistics show the urgent need for taking action. Now, federal law, as Senator Smith mentioned, federal law and regulations primarily restrict the import, export, or interstate trade of products from endangered and threatened species, but they simply do not regulate intrastate sales. So wildlife products continue to be illegally imported and enter the domestic market. Because these products are smuggled into local state markets, state laws are needed to complement existing federal laws and regulations. So ivory smuggled into Baltimore could be sold to someone in Annapolis. 12 states across the country have passed similar laws. In addition, Washington, D.C. passed an elephant ivory and rhino horde trade ban, and it was enacted just this past summer. It's very likely that those illegal markets are simply shifting over to Maryland. And we did, Senator Smith mentioned mastodon and mammoth, and that was a perfect explanation. You can't tell if that piece of ivory is from mammoth, mastodon, or recently poached elephants, thus the need to prohibit them all. So this is an action Marylanders can take to ensure they are not unwittingly contributing to the illegal wildlife trade and to protect global populations of imperiled species, as they simply don't have time to wait. Useless trinkets and jewelry are not worth the extinction of these iconic species. We urge a favorable report for SB 381. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kohlberg. Next on the sponsor panel, we have Kate Daluski from the Animal Welfare Institute. This is favorable. You have 2 minutes. Ms. Daluski, are you there?
Yes, hi.
Oh, there we go. All right, go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today in support of SB 381. My name is Kate Daluski. I'm a senior policy advisor for the Animal Welfare Institute, a national nonprofit organization dedicated to alleviating suffering in animals with many members in Maryland. The illegal wildlife trade has implications for more than just the preservation of species. Poaching isn't a small or an unsophisticated operation. It's actually intertwined with violent militias, organized crime, and government corruption. Wildlife trafficking now produces profits of upwards of $20 billion a year, which places it among the top 5 criminal markets globally. The groups involved use poaching as a substantial source of funding for their other activities, and they use the logistics and supply chains of major container and shipping companies to move their product in a system that's interwoven with the networks that also enable terrorism, drugs, weapons, and human trafficking. This crisis has reached such a scale that these criminal groups are a concern for the stability of some African governments. Well-funded terrorist organizations operating in developing countries can take advantage of governments that lack the capacity to adequately regulate their country's natural assets. And we know that a region that's destabilized by corruption, by violent conflict, is not only problematic for the nations involved, but also for US security. At the federal level in the United States, there's been broad bipartisan consensus of the risk that wildlife trafficking poses to our nation's safety. Presidents Obama, Trump, and Biden have all issued executive orders that highlight the ties between wildlife trafficking and organized criminal networks. But the federal government can't regulate trade of wildlife products within a state, as Catherine alluded to. So SB 381 is necessary to complement federal measures and to ensure that commerce in wildlife products is tightly regulated throughout US markets. I hope the committee will act favorably on SB 381, and thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Ms. Daluski. Last witness on the sponsor panel is Ms. Kimberly Fullerton from the Maryland State Bar Association Animal Law Section. Ms. Fullerton.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Acting Chair Lamb and members of the committee. Again, my name is Kim Fullerton, and I am representing the Maryland State Bar Association Animal Law Section. I think that my fellow panelists also wanted me to identify myself as the American Bar Association's Wildlife Co-Chair, but I'm just here for the MSBA today. And I wanted to talk about how the wildlife trade has such far-reaching consequences for both people and animals and our shared sense of security. Wildlife trafficking truly is a threat to national security. It's a catalyst to the extinction of iconic species, the decline of biodiversity, destabilization of government, and the funding of terrorist organizations. The illegal wildlife trade produces annual profits of around $10 billion, and it's driven by an untraceable currency. Wildlife trafficking has evolved into a global network of criminal syndicates, which rely on the same supply chains, trade routes, and violent characteristics that are identified in other areas of organized crime. Criminal entities that are engaged in wildlife trafficking have also been linked to terrorist organizations and the trafficking of weapons, drugs, and human beings. We need state law to address this gap that we see at the state level in legislation. This bill will lock arms with national and global policy directives. Maryland should prohibit interstate trading of iconic species that are sourced through the illegal wildlife trade. This state legislation is necessary to complement federal law and more fully eliminate Maryland's role in the supply chain of the illegal wildlife trade. The global consequences of wildlife trafficking contribute to our shared financial, environment, and political decline. Given the scale of these interconnected priorities, we need collaboration in both policymaking and enforcement. We need a whole of government approach. Success and security will be best achieved through a cohesive legislation, both across and within borders. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Fulton. That ends the sponsor panel. We will go on to other individuals that are signed up in favor. If it's okay, we'll hold questions until we get through all the favorable folks. We'll go to Lisa Radoff from Maryland Votes for Animals. Ms. Radoff.
Good afternoon, Acting Chair Lamb, Vice Chairman Kagan, members of the committee. My name is Lisa Radoff from Maryland Votes for Animals, here in strong support of SB 381. You've heard the compelling case made for this legislation by Senator Smith, and you've heard excellent testimony from my colleagues, and you're going to hear even more. You have my written, so I will just make one point and be brief. The Maryland General Assembly is no stranger to taking a stand to protect a species. In 2013, Maryland was the first state on the East Coast to pass a law banning shark finning. In 2017 and 2018, the Maryland legislature did hear similar versions of wildlife bills that did not pass. Senator Smith, you were a sponsor of one of the bills with Senator Young. I testified on that bill. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on this bill today. I hope that Maryland will take a similar step forward, not just to protect sharks, as we did in 2013, but also to protect these endangered and threatened species whose numbers have dwindled precipitously since I was here the last time testifying on a wildlife bill. I want to thank Senator Smith for his sponsorship and urge this committee for a favorable report. The time is now.
Thank you, Ms. Radoff. Next, we have Alyssa Dangle with no affiliation listed. Ms. Dangle, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Alyssa Dangle, and I'm a sixth grader at Glenwood Middle School in Howard County. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on Senate Bill 381. Wildlife trafficking is a very cruel practice that sells animal products in parts. This bill can stop this and save many animals from extinction. We can also create a status quo, to not abide wildlife trafficking, to not turn a life into a pretty bag, and to not kill an animal so you can wear it as jewelry or have a pretty bag, to not turn a life into a thing you wear. Fewer than 7,100 cheetahs are alive because of poaching. All 7 species of sea turtles are facing extinction. There are only 68,000 giraffes left in the world. For comparison, over 692,000 people live in Baltimore. This means more people live in Baltimore than there are giraffes and cheetahs left in the world. This bill being passed can save so many lives. I can't imagine the world without some of these iconic species. It's such a cruel practice to have animals killed for something as worthless as jewelry or bags or chess sets. Animals are killed every day because of it. We need to care about the fact that in a matter of years, so many iconic species could be dead. We need to care that there are more people in Baltimore than giraffes and cheetahs combined. We need to care about this bill so we can save so many lives. Senate Bill 381 makes such a huge difference to the world. It can save so many elephants and rhinoceroses and tigers, lions, leopards, cheetahs, jaguars, sea turtles, pangolins, and giraffes. These animals all deserve not to be wiped out to make jewelry that someone will wear once and probably not wear again. Please pass Senate Bill 381.
Thank you, Ms. Dangle. You did a great job. Your teachers at Dunlogan should be very proud of you, so thank you. Next, we will go to Mr. Ryan Frederickson from the National Aquarium.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Ryan Fredrickson, Vice President of Government Affairs for the National Aquarium. It's good to be back before you this afternoon, and we are here to request a favorable with amendment report for SB 381, as Senator Smith mentioned. We are in full support of the Senator's amendment, which was also offered in the House and which is also featured in our written testimony. The amendment will ensure that the National Aquarium is properly classified as an educational institution under the bill, and this change will allow us to continue to use legally obtained animal artifacts in our education programs, as well as exchange educational resources between other accredited zoos and aquariums. As for the bill itself, saving wildlife and habitats is one of our 3 strategic conservation goals. SB 381 aligns with this goal by prohibiting the intrastate exchange of certain parts of products of vulnerable animal species. Specifically, this bill would apply to all 6 endangered or threatened sea turtle species found in U.S. waters. For more than 30 years, the National Aquarium has responded to live stranded sea turtles and rehabilitated sick or injured sea turtles for release back into their ocean home. Illegal wildlife trafficking undercuts the efforts of the National Aquarium and other organizations across the country to protect species like sea turtles from extinction. So we respectfully urge the committee to adopt the sponsor's amendment with a favorable report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fredrickson. Lastly, we have Ms. Diane Hutchins from the Maryland Zoo in Baltimore.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Acting Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, Diane Hutchins, Vice President of Government Affairs for the Maryland Zoo in Baltimore. The Maryland Zoo in Baltimore is the 3rd oldest zoo in the nation. And for 146 years, we have been caring for and caring about animals and wildlife. Of the 17 species that are listed in this bill, there are 8 that you can come and see at the Maryland Zoo in Baltimore. We support this bill with amendments and want to thank Senator Smith for proffering the sponsor's amendment. As Mr. Fredrickson outlined, we have similar support for that amendment. Wildlife trafficking is abhorrent and reprehensible. Killing animals for their parts is antithetical to everything that the zoo stands for. We appreciate the purpose, the intent of this bill, and we would ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill 381. You have more information in my written testimony, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hutchins. That concludes the folks who are giving verbal testimony. There is no opposition testimony. We have 2 questions. We can start with Senator Kagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Diane Hutchins, Ryan Fredrickson, great to see you guys. Alyssa, you were super. I hope you warn your mom that you're going to take her job someday because you did a great job. My question is for the sponsor of the bill, if not one of your witnesses. I am in the bill and on, of course, the right window just closed. Okay, here we go. On page 4 of the bill, we talk about on lines 10 through 20, let's say, talk about that the buyer takes possession in the state. The seller is located out of the state. Can you clarify for me a couple of things? First off, how this would affect online sales? Because, yeah, and why that should matter. If the seller is in state or out of state, why should that matter if it's stuff that we don't want being sold or purchased at all? So if you can just speak to that part. And then the musical instruments piece spoke to me. And I wonder if you can just, is that one of the big parts of the challenge here? And didn't love the idea of these items being destroyed, but if you can speak to that briefly too. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair. And I'll answer the question, but I do want Ms. Kohlberg and Ms. Fullerton to chime in because she mentioned this in her testimony, which deals with inter and intra state transactions. So right now in Maryland, the intra transactions are not regulated. Inter are regulated largely by federal law, although there's some exceptions. Some of the species are not covered under federal law that this bill would loop in. So that's where you're kind of tightening down the loop of the inter and intra distinction. So like online sales, if you brought it back here in Maryland, in Pennsylvania, if the organization was, let's say Pennsylvania had a prohibition and it was not, it was prohibited there, and that you couldn't sell it from Pennsylvania to Maryland, but you could sell it from Maryland to Maryland. You know, if it was an online transaction that occurred in Maryland from a Maryland seller to a Maryland buyer, not covered. So it's a piecemeal patchwork that we're trying to close a loophole here in Maryland, and that's essentially what that section of the bill is trying to do. And I think that Ms. Kohlenberg, she spoke to that patchwork. So it's intra sales, but you'd have to go state by state and then also look at the federal law to see what's not covered and what is, to understand what species are covered and what species are not.
So Chair, Senator Smith, so the seller is located in the state. I'm reading that quite literally. So hypothetically, could a Marylander drive to Pennsylvania, sell it to a Marylander, and then return home to Silver Spring where they live?
So that would, I don't know what Pennsylvania's law, but let's say that Pennsylvania is permissible to sell it.
New Jersey, I don't care.
Whatever state it's permissible to sell them there, then you could theoretically do that if it's permissible and not excluded by federal law. If that makes sense. If the species is not covered by federal law and it's also permissible in that second state, then that transaction would be legal. Right. So there's federal.
Quick follow-up, and I understand we're going to hear from Ms. Kohlberg also. Do you know whether there's federal legislation that's pending so that it's not the patchwork quilt that we're talking about here?
So it's not pending. There's three pieces of legislation, and I'll let the experts speak to this, actually practice it. But you've got the Endangered Species Act. You've got the International Trade in Endangered Species of Wildlife, Fauna, and Flora. And you've got the Lacey Act. And between the three, there are a number of species and flora and fauna which are covered as prohibited to sell nationwide. Now, I will defer to the experts for the list that's enumerated in the bill on page 3. I don't know which species are folded under the federal law, but not under state right now. So they could probably pull out the species to give you that particular answer.
Thank you, Senator Smith.
Yes, thank you, Senator Smith, for that very good explanation. And thank you, Senator Kagan, for this question. I think this demonstrates how confusing all the laws are, because the species that are protected under our bill, some of them are protected under the Endangered Species Act because they are listed as endangered or threatened. All of them are listed under CITES, which is an international trade agreement. So they're protected in smaller ways and more limited ways in terms of their trade and their parts and products. And other animals are not protected. Like, for example, giraffes. There's no law against selling giraffe parts and products, importing, exporting them into the US, or crossing state lines with them. But we maintain that all the species listed in this bill are imperiled and are at risk throughout their ranges, thus the need to include all of them. And to your point, the online sale just muddles everything up even further. And a lot of online marketplaces will have tiny disclaimers that says we can't ship to Illinois because of their state law. So it really is complicated, thus the need for a strong state prohibition. And I think you also had a question about the musical instruments.
Yes, please.
Okay. So essentially, there are some exemptions to the bill, and so owners of legal items can continue to possess the items, pass them down to heirs and transfer, etc. And prohibitions do not apply when the covered animal species, part or product is part of an antique or is a fixed component of a musical instrument, provided that the item is not made wholly or primarily of the covered animal part and the total weight of the covered animal species part or product is less than 200 grams. So essentially, these are exemptions that really mirror federal law. It's not anything stricter. So we are exempting items that have a small amount of ivory and our antiques and our musical instruments, given they were all legally acquired. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. If I could just do one quick follow-up, either from Ms. Kohlberg now or maybe in a follow-up, but again, going back to page 4, specifically line 14, the seller is located in the state. That just seems like drive a truck through it language. And I just wonder, and again, we can talk offline or something, whether that needs to be tightened if we're going to consider, debating or moving this bill or whatever. That just, I wonder if there's a way to emulate language maybe that's done elsewhere, or something that's a little more restrictive or a little more comprehensive maybe. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I might be able to speak to that. And that goes a bit towards why we need this state legislation that is specific to Maryland. And when we look at federal legislation, some of the reason why we do need something so specific to Maryland that is done through the Maryland legislature is because federal law in some ways is hands-off and connected to the Commerce Clause. So Maryland federal law is going to specifically not regulate certain areas of state commerce, particularly when Maryland is going to be doing transactions in commerce with different states. And it almost becomes a jurisdiction issue. So if we pass legislation, are we going to expect, Pennsylvania enforcement to tamp down on that? And so that is, I believe, the focus on why we're trying to control and address this gap that we see within Maryland. And we want it also to mirror, federal legislation and the way that we're seeing national trends go as well. And part of the issue is that what is the definition of an endangered species? So with that, we look at federal legislation for the US, and then also we have international legislation as well. So I think that Catherine mentioned CITES, we have what's called the Red List. And again, those are all just conglomerations of different species that different governments say, this is where we see data trending, and these are the concerns that we have for these specific species. And so this bill does a fantastic job of encompassing problems that we identify and species that we see on certain lists. And I believe that you'd also mentioned a concern about the destruction of, and so that is also exactly on point with the trends that we're seeing. And so across different countries and across different jurisdictions, I think even in New York City, they did a public burning of ivory, because for the priority is for goods and products that are seized related to a national security issue. We don't want to put that back into the market. We don't want to promote these channels, and we don't want Maryland specifically to be a part of this supply chain. So I hope that goes to what your question.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator Kagan. Lastly, we have a question from Senator Croza.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. Thank you to Senator Smith and Mr. JPR Chair. And I have to tell you, thank you for bringing us both a pro-animal protection bill with these protecting these imperiled species, and also a pro-national security bill. And my question, I have constituents who have contacted me mainly on the pro-animal protection and species, and I think we've covered that in the hearing, but I was very intrigued, Mr. Chair, when you talked about the pro-national security, and given your military experience and leadership, I was trying to better understand the possible ties to terrorism and how, by moving forward with a bill like this, you might actually also be able to maybe lead back to other investigations and break some of these terrorist rings. So just wanted to ask you to flush out the national security piece a little bit more.
Excellent. Well, thanks. Well, one of the things that when you kind of evaluate a bill is, is there a problem? Does the bill solve the problem or attempt to solve the problem? And is the issue relevant to Maryland? What are the unintended consequences? This is a problem here in Maryland, and it is something that is a well-documented problem internationally. But in Maryland, there was a 2017 report that came out, and it showed that there were at least 30, I think, sellers of antique sellers that had this material in them. And Lisa, you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a prominent problem in Maryland, and obviously we have a tier 1 port here, so a lot of commerce comes through. This market, the numbers that I mentioned earlier at the top of my testimony, $23 billion of kind of dark money funneled from these enterprises going to various corners of the world for terrorism finance purposes, illicit markets. That translates, and I'm thinking a lot of folks in the Navy. There's the Horn of Africa is a major base for terrorists, for us, for special operations and for intelligence, and for the Navy in particular. And that is actually a major funnel connection for some of these illicit funds to fund terrorist activity. And so there's a direct nexus between this activity, this market, and the role that Maryland and other states like us can play in just depriving that source of funds that ultimately ends up used against American forces abroad. So, I can actually, if you will, I have a couple of links that I'll send over to you with some reports, and I can get that over to you at the end of the testimony.
All right, thank you, Senator Smith. Seeing no further questions, that ends the bill hearing for Senate Bill 381.
Thanks. Can I just say one thing, Mr. Chair?
Yeah,
I just
go
want
ahead.
to specifically say thank you to Ms. Dangle. That was fantastic testimony, and we're looking at a future senator or most likely a future president one day. So just thank you so much for your time. It was fantastic testimony.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Dangle. We appreciate it, and very well done. All right, so next we'll go to Senate Bill 454. This is Senator Bailey's bill on marine contractor license, performance of services, licensing requirements, and fees. I see Senator Bailey is with us again. Welcome back to EHE.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the committee. For the record, Senator Bailey, District 29, St. Mary's in Calvert County. Today, I'm introducing Senate Bill 454, Marine Contractor License, Performance of Service, Licensing Requirements, and Fees. This bill authorizes an individual who's employed by a county or a municipality in the state to perform specified marine contractor services within the scope of their employment without having to obtain a license. The bill also exempts a local government employee who performs marine contractor service within the scope of their employment who must be licensed from paying the license or testing fees. State and federal employees are already exempted from the requirement to be licensed to perform these services. However, counties and municipalities do not currently have this same exemption. That is what this bill is doing. They are required to hire licensed marine contractors for relatively minor maintenance and repair projects that could otherwise be handled by individuals who are already employed by the county or municipality. So I just want you to understand, if they're already employed by the state property right by a county property, we go down there with the state and they go ahead and fix this. The county can't. So the county has to hire a different contractor. This leads to increased costs and requires more taxpayer money to be spent on these projects. I'm submitting an amendment, which I think you have, to this bill that is the result of discussions between the House sponsor and those who had concerns about the bill following the House hearing. With this amendment, the exemption from the license in this bill only applies if the project presents a de minimis risk to human health or the environment. It does not require a federal or a state permit. If the marine contractor services do not increase the footprint of an existing structure, if the project involves an existing structure. For other services that would still require a county or municipal employee to be licensed, the bill does exempt them from having to pay the license or the testing fees or receive their license. Thank you. I request a favorable report on Senate Bill 54.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bailey. Thank you, Senator Bailey. We have one witness on the sponsor panel. This is Shannon Nizal. from the Calvert County Parks and Recreation Department. Ms. Nassau.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Acting Chair Lamb, Vice Chair Kagan, and committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today. For the record, I'm Shannon Nassau, and I'm the Director of Parks and Recreation for Calvert County. In addition to representing the interests of Calvert County, I'm also speaking on behalf of the Maryland Association of Counties Parks and Recreation Affiliate, or MACPRA. Calvert County and MACPRA are in full support of Senate Bill 454 as amended. Thanks to the hard work of Delegate Clark, this bill passed unanimously in the House in both the 2020 and 2021 session. Last year, we worked closely with Delegate Clark, the Maryland Department of Environment, and the Chesapeake Bay Foundation to have conversations on a resolve that would meet the needs of all organizations. However, it ran out of time in the Senate last session. And thank you to both Senator Bailey and Senator Jackson for co-sponsoring this bill before you today. As the active legislation currently allows, counties and municipalities are the only agencies that do not enjoy the privileges of exemption from marine contractor license requirements, which puts a great deal of financial burden on local governments, as well as an issue of timely rectification of safety concerns. With this current bill, it allows agencies such as mine throughout the state to complete repairs and perform routine maintenance without a license. As an example, our agency had a floating dock vandalized at one of our many piers and non-motorized launches. This repair could have been completed with materials easily purchased at a hardware store by current staff. Instead, Calvert County was forced to utilize a licensed marine contractor for the work, spending over $2,400 for this de minimis repair and causing delays to get that facility back open to the public. It's not the goal of local governments to negatively impact the Chesapeake Bay and its watersheds. As Calvert County is surrounded on three sides by the waters of the Chesapeake Bay and the Patuxent River, it's a shared goal to protect our precious watershed. These waters offer so much to our communities, environment, and the overall health of our region. We understand the need for proper vetting of those who are doing intrusive work into our watersheds and the need for proper licensure. Parks and recreation agencies are avid protectors of our environment through programs, outreach, and conservation. The intent of this bill is to allow agencies to meet the needs of our communities in a more fiscally responsible and efficient manner to complete work that has minimal risk to human health and environment. Passing this bill would allow local government agencies to complete routine maintenance and repairs that are low risk without the need to obtain a licensed marine contractor, and provides a compromiser on the licensure itself by lifting of fees for local government agencies. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your favorable report on Senate Bill 454.
All right, great. Thank you, Ms. Nassau. That concludes the witnesses for this bill. There are written testimony in your packet that's favorable, including one that's informational only from the Maryland Department of the Environment, no one unfavorable for this bill. Seeing no questions, that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 454. I think we are on our last bill for this afternoon, and this looks like Senate Bill 489. We have Senator Hershey as the sponsor. Looks like he is here, and this is Queen Anne's County Public Safety Buildings used for agritourism. Senator Hershey, the floor is yours as the sponsor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Senator Steve Hershey to present Senate Bill 489. Which is a local bill that would add Queen Anne's County to the list of 11 other counties exempting existing agricultural buildings used primarily for agritourism from pursuing a change in occupancy if one, the occupancy is less than 200 people, and two, the means of egress meet the International Building Code. According to Queen Anne's County, agritourism is an important focus for the tourism industry in Maryland, and even more so in Queen Anne's County. Visitors come to the county in search of outdoor activities that are unique and educational. The industry is also important to our local heritage, as farming and fishing have been a way of life for Queen Anne's County and all of the Eastern Shore since its inception. Mr. Chairman, I have a sponsor amendment that has been offered as well that would just change the effective date from October 1st to June 1st. So that the county can sooner take advantage of the provisions of this legislation. Again, this is a local bill supported by the Queen Anne's County Commissioners, and I ask the committee for a favorable report. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator Hershey. Just a note to the panelists and to the committee, there is no unfavorable testimony. We will proceed to the sponsor witness panel. The lead witness here is Mr. Bruce Bariano. Mr. Bariano, you can go ahead and proceed. I assume you're representing Queen Anne's County.
Yes, I do. Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for the record, Bruce Bariano, registered lobbyist for Queen Anne's County, Maryland. I'm speaking on behalf of the county commissioners and the county administrator in very strong support of this legislation introduced by Senator Hershey. It's a simple, very basic bill. I think respectfully, the proof is in the pudding in that there are quite a number of other counties that have been active under this current law. It's worked well. There have been no problems. It makes sense. It is economic development. It's recreation. Queen Anne's County wants to be a part of that. And we ask for a favorable report and are in support of the amendment that Senator Hershey is offering as well. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bariano. Also on the sponsor panel is Mr. Colby Ferguson from Maryland Farm Bureau. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Colby Ferguson on behalf of Maryland Farm Bureau. Again, come in support of this bill. This looks to be a popular bill again this year. I think right now we have 11 counties that currently have adopted, or that we've passed legislation over the last 3 or 4 years. And this adds Queen Anne's County to that. I think you've already heard a bill from Worcester County earlier in the session that was same as this bill. So, and then I think there's a couple of more that are coming up in the near future as well. So we support this bill. We like how it is an enabling legislation. It does not require the county to force this. The counties still have to adopt the language. The way I look at it is you've got the national building code, and then you have state building code that layers on top. You can't do less. And then the county builds on top of that. They can't do less. So what this does is this removes a layer of state that the county would have to remove to move back to that national building code. But still, you would have to be required to meet egress requirements, things like that. It's primarily a focus on the sprinkler ordinance. And then if you have like a bank barn, under current law, you would have to put an elevator in, even though you could get to it from the backside. So this bill just puts Queen Anne's County in a group with 11 other counties. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ferguson. Lastly, I see we have a question from Senator Kagan, but we have one more witness left, and that's Mr. Kevin Addix with Grow and Fortify.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'll be very quick and just say that on behalf of value-added agriculture and agritourism in the state, Grow and Fortify and the industries we represent support this legislation. Thank you to the sponsor, and we urge your favorable report.
All right, thank you. We have questions from Senator Kagan. Go ahead.
Briefly, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bariano, you call and text all of us, well, not text, call all of us on our birthday. So my question is, did you have a good birthday yesterday?
Madam Vice Chair, thank you for your, I had a fabulous day yesterday. I really did. I really did.
All right. Well, stay well and healthy. It's nice to
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Very
Mr.
kind,
Chair.
very kind. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a happy belated birthday. You look not a day
Thank you,
older,
Senator.
Mr. Bariano.
Thank you.
All right, so that ends the hearing on Senate Bill 489. There's no further written test. There is one piece of written testimony that's informational only from the Maryland Department of Agriculture. That ends our bill hearings for this afternoon. There's no further bill hearings, so I think we can go ahead and adjourn unless the chairman would like to speak to the committee at all with any further instructions. It doesn't look like that's the case. So we're glad to be able to get you out before 5 hours compared to last week and no fire in this office. So thank you all.
Thank you. Can you do it again tomorrow?
No, I don't want to. All right. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.
Good job. Bye.